that? She never said she was ending the group, so this isn't a new contract, it's just an extension. Everyone celebrates because that problem is finally solved, and Afer immediately says they should celebrate at the Oasis bar. In the end, Creve really does smile. They all head back together. Meanwhile, at the Caravan Guild, a festival is underway, an event held twice a year to celebrate crossing the desert. People play, dance and sing, doing whatever they can to brighten life in that quiet wasteland. They share food and gather around the fire. One man even thanks everyone and announces some happy news. His son is getting married, but someone is watching from a distance, and then a group of 4 shows up. The caravan guards immediately stop them and ask who they are. Bandits, maybe? The man answers that they're special investigators from the Fairy Alliance, looking for someone. He says the target has a very distinct face, so they might remember him, and there's a chance he slipped into the caravan to hide. The person they're after is Falado Bin, the warrior Valterra, the one who killed the Elf King. Everyone is shocked to hear that. One man asks if that's really true. The investigator says he carries Rolian's seal, so yes, he really is with the Fairy Alliance. The caravan man says he had no idea Valterra had done something like that. But the caravan has nothing to do with him. The investigator says he knows they aren't connected to Valterra, and he's glad the caravan wasn't harmed by him. Then out of nowhere, one of the 4 bites his own finger. The investigator asks if his companion is okay, and the man brushes it off, saying they're probably just hungry since they haven't eaten yet. So the caravan man replies that those people seem to be heading to Callan. The investigator says that's a big help. Then the bald soldier complains that Callan is too far away, and asks if they can't just grab one person here. The one who seems to be the leader says the mission comes first, but the green-haired one complains that they haven't eaten in a long time. Then a little girl walks up and asks if he's hungry. She offers him some soup. He just stares at her, and he looks seriously shady. When he reaches for the bowl, the emblem of the Great Land is visible in his hand. He thanks her, and the girl runs back to her mother, asking if she did a good thing. Her mother says it was a little risky. Then notices something in the child's hand. It's a cut with green roots growing from it. The little girl collapses. He'd used a poison knife. The others ask what he just did, but he says he couldn't help it. Then he claims it was necessary to find the target without exposing their identities. Another one snaps back that they have no reason to follow Richard. That traitor. The bald one says his fingers are already going numb, so he's going to get warmed up on them. The apparent leader says it's impossible to manage this team when they keep choosing their feelings over the mission. Still, since everyone's excited, they'll just leave behind a new story, that the entire caravan was slaughtered by the warrior Valterra. He tells them to finish it fast before Richard arrives. And just like that, the massacre begins. Back at the tower, everyone's passed out. Ifir is asleep in Atiz's lap, Kavir is out cold on the table, and Prota is sleeping there too. Then Barolt walks in. He takes one look around, and the next second Prota goes flying through the wall. Prota yells as he crashes down, wondering what just happened. Barolt doesn't explain anything, he just tosses Prota's backpack onto him. Then Barolt drops a rope through the hole, and tells them to move. Prota asks, move where? The others show up, and Kavir asks why Barolt is being so violent. Madam cuts in and says the real violence was what they did to her shop yesterday, starting with Kavir crying while drunk, and the rest of the group making it worse instead of stopping her. They were screaming like the world was ending, and thanks to that, she had to close early. Kavir says she doesn't remember, but Madam doesn't care. Then she reveals that Barolt is thinking about taking the goddess's mission after all. Kavir is shocked. Is that true? Yesterday he said no, but Barolt says he can't do it yet. First, he has to finish something else. He's going to use Valterra as a shield. Prota asks if that means they have to clear the dungeon, and the Sword King says yes. Kavir answers that if that's the case, she'll go too, along with the others. Barolt says they don't look useful. Kavir shrugs, maybe that's true, or maybe it isn't. Either way, everyone here shares responsibility for the goddess's mission. Barolt smiles at that, but Madam slices the rope and says she's seen their resolve, yet they should still give up. The Great Labyrinth of Kowlin is one of the 4 forbidden places for a reason. Countless people from the Hunters Guild tried to clear it and all failed. That failure pushed a neighboring country to send an entire army, and they failed too. Most of their elite soldiers ended up as monster food, wiped out by Kruzmerg, the divine beast. She adds that even Barolt challenged it many times and never beat it. Not even after 15 years. So even if Valterra can survive, the rest of them won't. Hades is stunned that there's a monster even the Sword King can't defeat, and Ifer asks what chance they have this time. Madam says there's no stopping Barolt anyway. He's a stubborn old man, so she'll let him do what he wants. But Prota says if that's how it is, he'll help the Sword King clear the dungeon first. After that, they'll go handle the goddess's mission together. For now, everyone else should rest. Then out of nowhere, Kavir cuts off some of her hair and hands it to Prota, saying it may help because it carries divine power. She leans close to his ear, and Atis and Ifa immediately wonder what's going on. Kavir whispers that it's to keep Valterra from getting distracted, since Barolt is the hero tied to the Great Land, and they were all people from the Earth. Anyway, after that, they head down into the pit. Prota says goodbye, and everyone else says their farewells too. Atis grumbles that moments like this make him hate being low level. But Kavir says this is actually a good chance to absorb more vital force. There was still plenty left while they were searching for Barolt. They keep talking, but Madam brings up the mess from the day before, and says that since those two are off to save the world, somebody still has to pay for the drinks. And thanks to Ms. Kavir, they went through a lot of high-class liquor, so the rest of them can pay the bill with their bodies. In the end, she puts all three of them to work to pay it off. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the desert, Song says he knew they were heading here, but now he's dying of thirst and would do anything for a spoonful of ice cream. Lordy asks where they're supposed to get ice cream in the middle of the desert. Song quickly changes his request to just a little water, but Lordy refuses, they have to ration it. Leonhardt tells them to be quiet and stop wasting energy. So they keep moving through the desert until Leonhardt finally finds the Caravan Guild. As they head inside, they find people impaled on stakes. Bodies are scattered all over the ground. They first suspect bandits, but Leonhardt points out that nothing valuable was taken. The civilians probably never even had a chance to react. That means the attackers may still be nearby. Then he spots a poster of Valterra. Since those wanted notices shouldn't be out yet, Leonhardt starts wondering if this is tied to the goddess. Suddenly a woman rushes out and attacks Lordy. Leonhardt stops her at once and gets ready to use his power, but Song tells him to wait, so Leonhardt uses a calming force on her instead. He explains that they're with the Dark Brotherhood and asks what happened. The woman is completely shaken. Leonhardt offers to heal her, but she begs him to save her son first. Then she explains that strange men came the day before and used poison. While Leonhardt treats her son, she says one of those men was about to kill her when another man showed up. It was Richard. He shouted that his orders were to search the place and leave, then demanded to know what they were doing. The other man answered that he was waiting for the traitor Richard and couldn't let any Romeo people live. Another woman called William Heartless and said that if Richard hadn't stepped in, she would have blown his head off. Then an axe slams into the floor. A girl appears and says that now that they know the targets went to Callan, there's no need to waste any more time here. She tells Richard to clean up however he likes. That is how the woman survived. Richard saved her, but her injuries were still too much. Leonhardt tells her to rest. Lorm can't understand why someone from the Fairy Alliance would do this. Song points out that leaving wounded people in the desert is basically the same as killing them. Leonhardt says this was the work of Ormfla's demons. He can tell just by looking at the scene. He still hasn't forgotten what the Tarikios did 15 years ago to the villages, to their families, to everything. As they keep moving through the desert, Song apologizes, but the little boy is still alive and they're carrying him. Leonhardt tells Song to stop. Song asks if he really isn't angry about all this. Leonhardt says anger won't help. There's no point going after the Fairy Alliance right now, they're probably connected to the call and most likely hunting Valterra. If that's true, they need to find him first. This isn't the time for revenge, they need answers. Meanwhile, at the pit in Fosu's Fall, deep inside the cave in the oasis, there's a path that connects straight to Callan's dungeon. It leads all the way to the deepest floors and hunters who use this route never come back. Prota thinks about Barolt, the Sword King, an old ally of the heroes who betrayed the goddess. He still doesn't know what to make of him, especially since Barolt seems able to tell he isn't the real warrior Valterra. That leaves Prota wondering if Barolt finds out he's a Tarikio. Can you really trust him? Barolt tells him to focus. If he decides Prota is useless, he'll leave him behind. Then Barolt opens a door. Prota asks what it is. Barolt says it's the first entrance and opening it is Prota's test. Prota asks if this really is a test, then says fine, but the moment he tries to open it, his shoulder bursts open. Barolt calls him an idiot for not even knowing how to treat his own wounds. Prota says it's his fault, but Barolt tells him to watch carefully. Prota wonders what he's doing. Barolt explains that enemies won't wait around for him to heal, so he grabs an insect nearby, uses its web on his hand and says covering a wound like this keeps it from reopening. Prota points out that it looks poisonous, and it is. Even so, Barolt presses it down and his wound closes. He explains that by controlling his muscles with aura, he can direct the blood flow in his body. Prota asks how he did that. Barolt brushes it off like it's simple, but Prota still can't copy it, so Barolt tells him to grab a potion from his bag and drink it, right when someone comes running in. Prota says he'll try again, but then he notices the writing and realizes the door isn't meant to be forced open. It needs electricity. Just then, a woman appears and begs for help, and Prota recognizes her as one of the twins from Martin's group. The story then cuts to the monster Martin's group is fighting. One of the twins tells everyone to fall back because it's too strong, they can't beat it. But Martin pushes forward, saying if he keeps running now, he'll never get stronger. He remembers the Ormphalus monster and keeps repeating that he has to get stronger. Then the wall explodes and falling rocks crash down on him. The twins panic, not knowing what to do. Martin keeps fighting, or rather getting crushed. He's covered in injuries, and all he can say is that he only ever wanted aura. Then the tip of a blade appears and pierces straight through the monster. It wasn't an arrow at all. It was the sword god's blade. The second Martin saw the red hair, the aura, and the overwhelming power around him. Everyone recognized Barolt, the Sword King. With Prota standing behind him, Martin admits he owes Barolt for saving his life, but still asks him to teach him aura. Barolt shuts that down right away. It's not something a person can simply learn. He says the only reason the guy beside him survived this long is because he was lucky enough to have aura at all. If Martin wants to grow stronger, he'll need another path. Martin gets upset and the twins tell him to calm down so they can treat his wounds. Prota says this dungeon isn't a place they should be. Begging to learn aura will only get Martin killed. Martin snaps back that Prota can't understand because he's a Volta and warrior. He has no idea how painful it is to be weak. Brad respected strength and even promised they'd cross the Great Forbidden Lands once they got stronger. But Brad is gone now because Martin was weak. If someone had stopped him, he might have lived long enough to become stronger. Prota grabs him by the neck and says he understands. Then he asks if getting revenge still wasn't enough. Before it can go further, Barolt punches Martin and calls him a brat, who doesn't even know what he's up against. Then he tells one of the spiritualists to take the potion from his pocket and give it to him. One of them says Martin normally isn't like this, but ever since their teammate died, he's changed. Even so, they're thankful. Prota says he'll escort them back up and then return, but the spiritualist says he doesn't need to. Prota insists it's too dangerous for them to stay. He also explains that the door only opens by force, which means they'd need to lure a monster there. The spiritualist asks if he can read the ancient writing and he freezes. Barolt notices and tells him to stop. Then he looks toward the door and sees it's already swarming with monsters. Prota says there's a monster on the other side too, and now they are trapped. He thinks things would be fine if it were only him and Barolt, but he isn't sure he can protect everyone else. Then Barolt simply lifts the entrance cover and tells them to get down. Prota grabs the twins and says they need to move fast. Then he jumps in. After one more look, Prota follows. They slide down what looks like a saw pipe. Prota asks where it leads, and Barolt says it goes straight to the lowest floor, to his home. After a long slide, they finally drop through with the rushing water. For a moment, Prota sees something like a giant skeleton and wonders if this is really Barolt's house. Inside Barolt's home, the spiritualist finished treating Martin. They say this should be enough. Now he just needs time to recover on his own. They can't believe Barolt saving them was almost a miracle. What really shocks them though is the house itself. It's terrifying. The roof is made from monster ribs. Prota explains that Barolt drained blood from the bones and used the fat to hold everything together, and honestly, he thinks that's impressive. Barolt says it sounds like he's got a good eye. Prota replies that he once built a house out of monster bones too. Back at the start, he really did. But another monster destroyed it. Barolt says there are no monsters in this area. Prota calls it an underground paradise. Barolt agrees and says the door is the only thing separating heaven from hell. Then Prota takes a closer look at it. He notices it's basically just a hinge and wonders how that can even count as a door. Then he asks if they have to split it down the middle to open it. Barolt smirks, impressed that he figured that out so fast. Barolt says Barolt must have gone through this place a bunch of times, so the door clearly isn't normal. If that's true, he powers up his aura. The others stare at how strong he is as he lines up a strike and slams the middle of the door. Barolt watches and asks if the boy's sword is meant for stabbing from behind. Then he asks what Prota thinks he's doing by grabbing the door like that. Barolt tells him to gather his aura again. Prota swings one more time, but the thing still won't cut. Barolt finally says that's enough. He can't believe Prota is just a kid who doesn't even know how to use an aura blade. Prota has no idea what he means, and the group behind them is just as lost. Barolt says he brought enough supplies for 1 month, but with 5 people there, it won't even last 15 days. Prota asks what he's talking about. Barolt says that's how long he has to teach Prota the aura blade. Prota is confused. Training? Aren't they supposed to be in a rush? Barolt says that's exactly why. Then he takes a bone and slices the door open. He says aura can be trained and improved. Right now, Prota isn't using even 10% of its real power. If he shapes his aura into a blade, he'll finally be able to cut for real. Prota is stunned and asks how he did that. Barolt can already tell he wants to learn. What Prota really thinks is that it looks like a lightsaber. Barolt tells him to get ready for training. Prota gets fired up. Since he's only level 5, he couldn't use weapons well and didn't have any cool skills, but now he might actually get a lightsaber. Barolt says the training applies to both of them. Martin freezes, and Barolt explains that he doesn't know if Martin can manifest aura, but learning now would still help. It's a way for him to build himself up and become stronger on his own. Martin is so thankful he bows with his head to the floor, but Barolt tells them to eat first. Then the lesson starts. Barolt explains that vital force is split into 4 types: aura, force, mana, and prana. Aura is the most common, but most people never make it appear. It takes very careful control to use it. Prota says he's ready, and they can start right away. As soon as they begin, both of them strike at him, and he can't feel a thing. He says he'll dodge once they actually start attacking for real. That earns him a smack on the head from Barolt's staff. Barolt calls him an idiot for not even being able to sense the 4 vital energies. Prota complains that this is just bullying, so he starts watching Martin instead. Martin can feel the aura in the stick and dodge ahead of time. They even say it's crazy that someone as strong as Prota still can't sense all 4 energies. So 4 days pass, and Prota asks Barolt to teach him something he can use with his hands. Barolt says he only has one thing to teach him: how to release aura. It's simple. Focus aura at your fingertip, then fire it. Prota concentrates his aura there, and suddenly shoots out a beam. Basically like Piccolo. It even ends in a huge explosion. Barolt says it's weak, but still good enough to push an enemy back. Martin asks what that even was. Then he says he won't be able to train like that since he can't release aura. Barolt tells Prota to share his aura with him. Prota asks how. Barolt says it works just like wrapping aura around a sword. So Prota places a hand on Martin's shoulder and lets his aura flow into him. Martin starts to feel the aura entering his body. He can't believe it, and says, so this is what aura feels like, but then the aura fades, and Barolt says Martin clearly has talent for controlling aura. Prota, on the other hand, doesn't seem to show any talent at all. Then red crystal suddenly bursts out of Prota's hand, and he runs to call the spiritualist for help. Barolt just says Prota is pathetic. Even so, Martin says Barolt sounds jealous of him. The moment Martin received Prota's aura, he felt a power level he may never reach himself. Something crushing and unreal. Of course, he adds, it's still not on Barolt's level. Barolt says no. He's sure that Prota's aura only showed up recently, and with how much he has, that isn't normal at all. In pure amount, it might even compare to Barolt's. Martin says that's impossible, but Barolt explains that aura grows through life or death situations. It adapts so the person can survive, and Prota's aura may be this massive, exactly because he has no talent with swordsmanship. Martin asks if that means Prota got stronger by surviving extreme situations, and that is the one with real talent here. Barolt says that's right. He says everyone who came to become his disciple either ran away or died, and that reminded him of something. A true warrior is born when standing face to face with death. Later, they're roasting meat, and it seems Prota shared part of his story. Barolt says Prota spent the last 20 years fighting, and even then, he still never reached the peak of his skill. Prota says that's nothing compared to the Sword King, who fought his whole life. And on top of that, Prota fought because he had to, not because he wanted to. Then he asks if it's okay for him to eat all the meat, and everyone tells him yes. Once he's done, Barolt tells him to follow, because now the real training starts. He says a sword should be able to cut monster bones, though most swords aren't good enough. This one, though, is special. It was made from the World Tree. Prota says it was a gift from the Elf King, and his amazed Barolt knew that just by looking. Barolt explains that very few materials absorb aura that well. It's perfect for someone like Prota, who still can't control his aura. Prota is amazed when Barolt coats the sword with an aura blade. The cut comes out perfectly clean, and Barolt says using it that way gives a far better slash. Then Barolt notices something odd about the sword, but says nothing. Prota keeps rambling, so Barolt suddenly jabs him in the back, and he drops straight into a pit. Prota yells, asking what he thinks he's doing. Barolt tosses down the sword and says Prota doesn't have the talent to make an aura blade. So if he really wants to survive, he needs to learn to feel his aura. And even if he never learns the aura blade, that's fine. He already has a sword that can make up for it. Prota tells him to wait. He punches the door, but nothing happens. Then he starts complaining that Barolt planned this all along after feeding him so much, and asks what kind of training this is. That's when a hand appears behind him and attacks. The hand lunges at him. Prota thinks he should have known. Barolt wouldn't make training easy. He figures he'll have to learn by fighting until he sees a system message saying God's messenger can't be attacked, and he should devote himself instead. Prota wonders if this arm belongs to an angel. Looking closer, he notices the pillar stuck through the arm. It's what's keeping the arm fixed in place. He's sure this was Barolt's doing, and Barolt trapped it there without even caring what kind of creature it was. Prota remembers Kiwi's hair, and thinks that if he had it, he could fight in his other form. Outside, Barolt can sense the energy of both the angel and Prota through the door. Martin can feel it too, and says a Voltron warrior's power is seriously impressive, but Barolt says Prota is the only Voltron warrior that exists. Martin realizes that means it's still too early to call Prota a true Voltron warrior. Barolt says it doesn't matter. What matters is that Prota has a huge amount of aura, but his movements are strange. He wonders why Prota still isn't attacking. Then Prota suddenly bursts out after taking a hit right in the middle. He comes flying out and crashes across the floor. He thinks that before he can make any move, the warning stops him from attacking. He wonders why the guide works perfectly at moments like this. Then he notices a glow and wonders what it is. The hand is suddenly twisting in water, and Prota realizes he spent all this time relying on the guide, but it only warns him about what he can already see. So he decides to close his eyes and defend that way. He realizes this is how he can fight the angel. If his eyes are closed, the guide won't know what he's facing. Since the enemy can't move from its spot, he already knows where to strike. He gathers aura and sends out a vertical slash, something that barely seems to move the hand at all. The feeling he gets is the same as when he tried to cut the door. He thinks this is ridiculous. Prota keeps attacking, throwing out a cross strike, but even then the angel's hand only absorbs the impact. Prota starts wondering what this angel even ate to get this tough. Worse, that hand can still counterattack him. Martin notices the monster Prota is fighting gives off an energy different from the 4 vital energies. Barolt explains that he used the monster's skin to make Martin, asks if that means Prota can't beat the monster. Barolt says not without an aura blade. Still, he tells Martin to stop worrying about that and sharpen his senses by listening to the fight inside. So Martin does. That fight drags on for a long time. By the second day, it's clear the monster is way beyond normal, too strong and with no weak spot to exploit. On the 4th day, Prota even tries to break the door. When that fails, he goes back to fighting while Barolt just keeps watching. Then the 5th day comes. Prota does nothing but keep moving, trying not to get hit. At this point, he can't even remember the last time he slept, ate or drank. His sight is getting blurry, but the monster's arm still shows no sign of slowing down. He knows he can't keep dodging forever. Then he hears a sound. That's when he realizes it. Barolt notices too and says Prota is finally thinking. Martin asks what he means. But Sparrow explains that Prota's attacks were like trying to cut silk with a stick. To slice it, you'd need a sharp edge. And since Prota can't use an aura blade, he's going after the tiny opening to widen it. Martin gets it right away. But the twins are still lost. So Martin explains Prota wasn't only running from the monster, he was planning. He'd been circling on purpose, forcing the monster into big swings so he could make an opening and hit the slit Barolt made. Even without an aura blade, Prota strikes. The problem is, the system warns him he doesn't have enough aura to use it and tells him to rest. Martin says they have to act now because Prota's aura has vanished. Banjit asks why that matters. Martin says that without aura, Prota can't protect his body, especially when he's already this exhausted. But Banjit says it's fine. From the start, he expected Prota wouldn't be able to use an aura blade. He explains that an aura blade is made by condensing a huge amount of aura into a crystal. If Prota could form those crystals on purpose, like he once did in his hand, he could make an aura blade. But he couldn't. And Barolt calls that lack of talent bizarre. Inside, Prota keeps getting the same warning that he can't use an aura blade because of his level. The angel attacks, blood sprays, and the arm keeps coming. But the sword slips right under its nail. Barolt thinks that even with no talent, this boy has survived all this time. What he really wants to pull out of him is his true nature. When someone can't run anymore and is staring death in the face, that's when who they really are comes out. So Prota keeps fighting. Even if death seems like the only ending, he keeps telling himself there's only one thing left to do. Face the enemy right in front of him. That instinct to survive at all costs. Martin notices Prota's eyes have changed and Barolt says it's pathetic that someone has to be completely out of aura before he can finally feel the four energies. In Prota's view, he says that after awakening aura, everything looked like one single color. But now that he's totally empty, he can see everything clearly, including aura itself. Then he remembers what the Elf King said. The world tree absorbs aura, and when vitality and energy build up enough, they form red crystals called bloodstones. Bloodstones are aura crystals. Prota also remembers Barolt saying maybe he couldn't make an aura blade, but he already had one. So he grabs the wooden part of the sword and finally understands it was the handle. He pulls out the real blade and slices the door apart. The angel's arm goes flying and so does the shattered door. Only Prota is left standing in the back, holding a red crystal blade. He walks over to the group, tells Barolt, "Your son gives it," and passes out. Barolt just laughs. Then we cut to the inside of a bar where talk turns to how the crystal sword was made. At the place, a woman complains that she expected to find somewhere nice, but all she found were sweaty hunters fresh out of dungeons. Even Azai's tear famous all over Callan. Isn't that impressive? Though she admits it tastes good. She just wishes it was served ice cold. Then ice magic chills the drink in her glass and Hades introduces himself as the host of Aziz's. He says he only started recently, but is already taking feedback to improve the place and asks if she has a moment to talk. She lights up right away and practically gives him top marks for service. Meanwhile, the others joke that anyone would want to spend more time with Hades. Some of the men nearby just stare and say they don't get what's so special about him. He's so pretty they can't even tell if he looks more like a man or a woman. Another one says he'd love to get paid to smile at women too, but their glasses suddenly get slammed on the table. Ifer asks if they really think Hades enjoys this job. She's completely shocked and says there's no way he actually likes dealing with customers like that. Hades answers that, honestly, it's hard not to mix work and personal feelings sometimes. Ifer says that if he wants, she can put in a good word with Saria so he can get hired, but he tells her not to worry. Thanks to her, they already have a place to stay. At the same time, Saria is speaking with the supplier of Oasis Tears and arguing over delivery methods. The man tells her not to worry and says they should stop wasting time on trivial stuff because he crossed the desert just to see her. Saria only thinks about ripping his head off, but holds back since she still needs more Oasis Tears. Then he says there's no future here in Corlin, and even if she built a high-class tavern and a place like this, it's not like she really plans to stay tied to these lands forever. In response, she picks up one of the tears and something suddenly drops into the man's glass, then lands on his foot. He asks what that was, and it turns out to be Kivir. She's dressed for cleaning, and Saria asks what she's doing there. Kivir calmly says that from 18 o'clock to 19 o'clock, it's time to clean the second floor. Saria tells her they're in the middle of an important talk, but Kivir just says it won't take long and she's almost done. Then she turns and starts to leave until the man snaps and orders her to come back. Even when Saria says she can make up for it, he says this isn't about money. He wants Kivir to clean his foot. Kivir sighs, thinking that acting like a normal person really isn't easy. Still, for the sake of her future, she has to do her best. So she dunks his foot straight into a bucket of water. The man freaks out asking if she's insane, but then another man falls from the second floor and crashes right onto his table. Kavir just stares at it. Then Saria starts explaining that when she first let Kavir help around the inn, she dropped food on the plates, broke dishes while washing them, and once Saria realized Kavir couldn't do any of that, she told her to clean the floor instead. Somehow that turned into this, and now Kavir is only making her debt bigger instead of paying it off. Kavir apologizes, but also points out what a rotten personality that man has. The man mutters that maybe it would have been better if Kavir had just scared him off. Saria says they are all too soft. Unlike the others who want to change the world, she just wants money. To survive, she used people who were useful to her. There may be bad people in the world, but there's no such thing as bad money, and justice won't feed her. Afer pushes back, saying Saria helped this city. Its growth happened because of her. Saria asks what idiot told her that. Afer says she heard Saria purposely bought the city's most expensive local products, helped bring in tourists, and even made a guidebook. Hades adds that Barolt also acts as this city's protection. Otherwise Callan, one of the 4 forbidden regions, would never be this peaceful. Hearing that, Kavir realizes that's why Saria got angry when she asked for Barolt's help. Saria says that's exactly it. If Barolt really leaves town, they'll all have problems. So what are they going to do now? When his decision is to leave for the good of the world. Kavir admits that may be true without his strength. Saving the world would be impossible. Still, she's not sure this is really for the good of everyone. Then she says that since Saria isn't a goddess, could she at least tell them more about her and Barolt? Saria refuses. So we cut back to Prota waking up. He wonders if he's in Barolt's house. Apparently he's still alive and his body has been healed. But he looks around at everyone there and notices one of the twins has probably been healing him for a long time. A small look of satisfaction crosses his face. Then he heads outside. Barolt says he finally woke up after sleeping for 2 days, and if he hadn't gotten up by tomorrow, he was going to throw him out. He asks why Prota is standing there like an idiot and tells him to sit down. Prota gets annoyed but he sits, then asks why Barolt saved him. Thanks to that beating, he says he slept like crazy and if he trains like that again, he might sleep forever. Barolt tells him to quit whining and hands him a drink. Prota calls it tea for old men but Barolt corrects him. This is a Valterra drink, passed down from warrior to warrior. It only looks like tea. It's actually strong liquor, made with blood and crushed bones too. Prota immediately says he wishes he hadn't heard that. Barolt just shrugs and says nothing restores your life force better. Still Barolt adds, maybe someone from another world wouldn't like it. Prota downs it anyway. Barolt watches him closely. Prota asks what's supposed to be wrong with the drink and says he's had tougher stuff. Then he asks how Barolt knew he was from another world. Barolt laughs and says Prota isn't exactly hiding it. People from another world have a weird habit of staring at empty space like they're checking info on items or monsters. Prota does it less than most but it was still obvious. What really surprises Barolt is that Prota isn't coming after him. After learning the Aura Blade, he figured Prota would rush him in anger. Barolt starts to say he could have killed him with it but Prota cuts in. If Barolt really wanted him dead he would have done it already. Besides, Prota says he still doesn't even know how to use the Aura Blade right. Barolt says at least he learned how to handle it at all but that kind of power has limits. Then he asks if that's enough for him or if he wants the greatest power possible. Prota says he doesn't know. He never spent much time thinking about getting stronger. So Barolt asks why he fights at all. Prota says it started with survival. Maybe if he was lucky he could someday live a normal life but after seeing Martin lose one of his companions he felt weak and useless. He says he's also spent more than 20 years fighting on his own. Then he crossed the continent and learned people from another world really don't belong there. While struggling to fit in he met a few friends. A dragon hiding among humans and a wyvern being hunted after getting blamed for killing a noble. There was also a messenger of the gods who was born without knowing anything. They were all strange in their own ways and Prota figures that's probably why they accepted him too. Honestly he's just glad he survived with them but since there are people standing in his way he has to fight. Barolt asks if that means he's fighting for friends or family. Prota says not exactly. He's not trying to battle the whole world. Then he turns it back on Barolt. Even if the goddess gave him a mission the heroes who betrayed everyone weren't his old comrades. No one would blame him for walking away so why does he keep fighting? Barolt says that a long time ago, 80 years to be exact, he only wanted one thing: to become the strongest in the world. Back then he was just a weak kid in the Valterra tribe. It was around the time dungeons and monsters started appearing out of nowhere, bringing misery everywhere. There were no hunter guilds yet, so the people of Ratna had to rely on mercenaries and outsiders from far-off islands. The Valterra tribe had a long history with mercenary work, and Barolt says even when he was young he went with them to fight monsters. It should have been just another job, but then a giant beast showed up and his mother had to save him. In the end, no one could cross the Blue Canyon and Barolt was the only one who made it out alive. The client acts sorry, but only because the cargo wasn't ruined. The monsters were still blocking the route, so transport would be hard. Even so, he says he'll pay. He tosses Barolt a coin. Looking back, Barolt says the tribe had nothing but strength, so people tricked them all the time. Many jobs ended without fair pay, and island people saw them as nothing but barbarians. Even as a kid, Barolt had had enough, so he put a knife to the man's throat. His answer was simple: money or death. Back at the Valterra tribe, the chief beats Barolt for it. People already loved spreading rumors about them, and now Barolt had attacked a client and ruined their name even more. Their land was getting worse, food was running out, and without more work the tribe would die off. Barolt tries to explain, but the chief cuts him off. Then he asks if Barolt failed that job because of his parents or because the monsters killed them. He tells Barolt to think about that and cool his head. Barolt says the food bought with his parents' lives made him sick, and it made him sick of himself too because he was the weak one who survived. Still, he had no choice but to eat it. So he decided to grow stronger than anyone ever had before. Years later he became a full-grown warrior of the Valterra tribe. By the time he was 21, there wasn't a monster left that could beat him. The tribe chief praises him as an amazing Valterra warrior and says that now he's an adult he can marry his daughter. She's thrilled by that. Barolt though has no interest. He says he's heading to the continent of Ratna to get even stronger. He'll finish the ceremony and leave. The chief's daughter accepts it, but says if he wants to go to the continent he'll have to beat her first. After that, Barolt left for Ratna to chase more strength. Barolt stops him there and asks, "Wait, what about your fiancée?" Barolt says he beat her without much trouble. Prota thinks that does sound possible if Barolt didn't care about her, but Barolt says it'd be a lie to say there were no feelings at all. He just didn't want her waiting for a man walking straight toward death in search of power. So he kept throwing himself into battles that could have killed him and wandered across Ratna. He entered every dungeon in his path, and since the only way he knew to grow stronger was to push himself to the edge, he fought every monster he found. Each time he came close to dying he got stronger, always searching for a better opponent. Then 4 years passed and he finally saw a familiar face. It was that same giant boar, the one that had once made him suffer. He was furious but also glad it was still alive. At last he could get revenge. Just as he moved in to attack the monster, another man appeared beside him. Both of them said they'd kill it and then turned on each other. The newcomer introduces himself as Thunderbolt, a swordsman from the Hunter Guild. He says he accepted the mission to subdue the beast and demands Barolt state his name and affiliation. Barolt ignores him and charges the monster. He barely even knows what hunters are. All he wants is to finish this quickly before the stranger becomes more annoying. But the moment Barolt lands a hit, Thunderbolt drives his sword into the monster too. Thunderbolt points out that Barolt isn't a registered hunter and unregistered people aren't allowed in dungeons. He orders him away from the monster, but Barolt grabs the beast and slams into it with everything he has. Thunderbolt is stunned. Barolt actually threw the monster. Barolt moves in to smash the creature's head, but Thunderbolt blocks by cutting in with his sword. Now Thunderbolt demands to know who Barolt is, and the two of them start fighting for real. Barolt says it was the first time he couldn't beat someone weaker than him because Thunderbolt was much faster. Barolt takes a hit to the face and barely budges, but Thunderbolt eats a brutal knee. That leaves Thunderbolt furious. He says he only meant to knock Barolt out, but now Barolt seems more dangerous than the monster itself. So Thunderbolt and Barolt charge at each other again, but the monster bites both of them at once. Lightning-like energy bursts out and Barolt's body takes the full shock. Thunderbolt immediately notices it and starts wondering if Barolt is an aura user. He realizes he can't beat him at his current level, but then Barolt's wounds split open. His aura goes out of control and he collapses. Thunderbolt checks if he really passed out and figures the backlash came from both the aura strain and his injuries. A little later, a butler shows up saying the eldest son of the future head of the Andalus family should be investing in the guild, not acting in secret where his father might hear about it and get angry. That's when the man is properly introduced as Garhan, one of the 4 heroes. The butler asks Garhan why he brought this barbarian back to his house since the man seems more dangerous than any monster. Garhan agrees but says Barolt's injuries were so terrible that an ordinary person would have died. He also fought Garhan without armor, which Garhan finds impressive. The butler still insists he's a barbarian and that this is risky. Garhan says it's fine. At this rate the man probably won't wake up for a month. Then the door suddenly blasts open. Barolt storms in and demands to know what this red flame is and what they did to him. Garhan is shocked. Only 2 days have passed. He realizes Barolt's healing factor must have grown because of his wide use of aura. Barolt says Garhan treated his wounds and Garhan explains that flame power is one of the 4 energies. It's his. Barolt says he still doesn't really get what aura is. Garhan tells him to come along. He'll show him how it works and Barolt can also collect the reward for taking down the monster. On the way, Garhan explains that finishing missions earns money and other rewards, and since they fought together, they'll split the payment. Barolt argues that makes no sense because he did most of the work, about 70%. Garhan fires back that none of that matters since he was the one who landed the killing blow. Barolt calls him a liar and insists anyone with eyes can tell the monster was basically 80% his kill. Garhan ends the argument with one simple question. Can you even write your name? Barolt just stares at him. Back then he thought everyone on the continent was crooked, but this guy felt different. Like a noble hiding behind another face. Even so, Barolt kept wondering what Garhan was really planning. That's when the level recording stone from Balterra shows up for the first time. Barolt asks what the stone is and Garhan explains that it's a magic tool used to measure someone's level. Barolt refuses right away. He says he doesn't want anything to do with levels. Garhan warns him that ignoring his own level is dangerous. If he keeps refusing to know where he stands, he could lose people he cares about and he'll never get the justice he talks about. Barolt shoots back that this is rich coming from a young master hiding his face while pretending to be a hero. To him the truth is simple. The weak die and the strong survive. That's just how the world works. So chasing justice feels pointless. Garhan finally reveals his face and says maybe that's true, but with enough strength they can change that reality. Then he tells Barolt this. If he truly wants more power, he should come with him. Garhan promises he'll get to fight the strongest enemies he can find. For as long as he wants. Barolt thinks that even though Garhan was a noble and a hero, he believed him. The conviction in his words felt real, just like Barolt's own. As they walk, Garhan tells him he should at least wear some clothes. Barolt says the stuff here costs too much and Garhan realizes he's going around half naked because he's broke. Barolt says that's what happens when everyone on the continent is a cheat. He explains that they took on work normal hunters struggled with, and since there weren't enough strong people they ended up clearing out dungeons most others could only clean up after. That made them famous and they picked up a bunch of artifacts too. The problem was whenever Barolt used aura with them, they broke. The one selling those artifacts to them was Zenovia, who was studying the magic of Ormphlis. In the end, Zenovia joined the group so she could study dungeons directly, becoming their first mage. As the hunters gained fame, the nymphs eventually gave them a mission. That mission was to attack nobles and kill their slaves, but both Barolt and Garhan hated nobles for their own reasons, so they turned on the nymphs instead and freed the slaves. Rolian was one of the people they saved and she joined them too. Once the nymphs' crimes were exposed, people started seeing the group as hunters who fought for the weak. When Barolt looked back, he could hardly count how many hunters had started following them. Garhan just said they needed to keep moving forward, so they kept fighting without stopping, facing death over and over, while Barolt kept growing stronger in his chase to become the strongest in the world. After one battle, Rolian asks if he's okay. Zenovia points out he got swallowed whole and still came out on top, while Rolian barely seems worried. Garhan says he honestly can't tell whether Barolt is human or not. Barolt answers that Garhan shouldn't talk, he's not the only monster in the group. Barolt believed the only way to grow stronger was to beat every other strong opponent in the world, and eventually one final winner would be left. As time passed, the long-awaited fight between them finally came. Garhan had spent all that time building his own style, a true magic swordsman's way, something close to transcendence. At that point, whether it ended in victory or defeat, the real winner would be accept right then the announcement cuts the fight short. The win is given to Garhan, but if the match had kept going the outcome might have changed. Later training continues with Ratna's strongest group. Barolt complains that all of it is pointless, but Garhan says it's for justice. If they want to build more hunter guilds, they need noble support, otherwise the world stays the same and nothing changes. Zenovia says anyone interested in magic tools or sponsorship should come talk to her, and Rolian adds that more guilds would mean better protection from monsters. Barolt decides there's no need to rush, there are still plenty of strong monsters out there, so he can put off settling things with Garhan, or at least that's what he thought. Then Garhan's father shows up. He says he'll head back to his hometown in a few days when the season ends. Garhan returns. He says things took longer than he expected. Everyone asks what happened, and Garhan quietly says his father died. That news hits the whole group hard. Garhan explains that his father had been sick for a long time, and when he came to see the show that day he wanted to apologize. Rolian says she's sorry, she had no idea. Garhan tells her it's fine, his father was already 80 and very old. Then he starts asking what the others plan to do next. Rolian says she wants to open an orphanage for children born like her. Zenovia says she paused her old research so she could focus more on studying Ormflus. Then it's Barolt's turn, but instead he says it sounds like Garhan wants to quit being a hunter. Garhan says he's heard rumors that beings from another world are coming. Zenovia calls that nonsense, but Garhan says they still don't know what those beings really are, human or not. He's sure they'd be stronger than monsters while wearing human form. Barolt says it doesn't matter if it's a monster, then it's their job. Rolian asks what happens if they really are human. That would mean they were dragged here against their will, so shouldn't they be treated as equals? If not, society would fall into chaos and a lot of civilians would die over territory. Garhan says that's exactly why he has to take the feudal lord position. A feudal lord can't keep working as a hunter. Barolt immediately grabs him by the neck. Garhan apologizes but says his mind is already made up, so Barolt tells him there's only one way to settle it. They'll decide a winner. The fight starts, and right away Barolt takes a hit to the face. He admits that felt strange. Rolian asks if they should stop them, but Zenovia says this isn't their first fight. She even puts up a barrier to block the sound and bets on Garhan to win. Garhan says they've already cleared most of the dungeon, so their duty as hunters is basically done. Barolt says Garhan just chose power instead, which doesn't surprise him at all because he's still just a noble rat. Garhan answers that the world is unfair and brute force alone can't fix everything. As a feudal lord though, he can at least help balance things out. Barolt says Garhan is full of excuses. Then a burst of energy slams into Barolt. Garhan says a sword can defend justice, but it can't create it. If he wants to build a fairer world, he has to become a feudal lord and maybe one day even control the empire. Even if his sword falls here, he still wants Barolt's help because Barolt's strength could change the world. Barolt says that doesn't sound so bad, but then he knocks Garhan back. Garhan asks what he's doing. Barolt says before any of that they still have to decide who wins. Then Barolt activates his aura. Rolian tells him to calm down and says they should treat Barolt's wounds first, but Garhan says that if he had really cut Barolt the way he would in an actual fight, then the match would already be over. Still, to be honest, he figures Barolt would have just torn off his arm, though judging by his face he might go straight for Garhan's head. Barolt tells him to shut up. Garhan starts using his ability to lock down the battlefield. Zenovia tells Rolian to cast a shield. Rolian asks over what area, and Zenovia just yells at her to protect the whole region. Then pure destruction starts with energy blasting everywhere. Garhan calls it the perfect sword technique. Barolt snaps back like something like that could exist and cut straight through the middle. Then Barolt realizes his blade has been stopped, and Garhan says if 2 swords aren't enough then he'll use 6. Barolt answers that if that still won't do it he'll just use something stronger. Then Rodopia smashes Garhan across the face and cuts at him, but Garhan slips away, appearing behind Barolt. He drives a strike through Barolt's stomach, then asks if he really wants to keep going until nothing is left of him. Barolt gets trapped inside a cage of lightning and the bolts tear into him until he finally snaps. He slams the ground and Garhan is shocked that Barolt just broke through his ability. Garhan blocks the next attack, but even so he still gets blasted away before a brutal horizontal slash comes after him. When Barolt jumps in he notices his foot has been pinned by a small blade, and Garhan triggers his lightning again, saying power is only a tool. Even if someone becomes the strongest in the world, that alone means nothing. Then he unleashes the lightning skill and in a flash Barolt's sword is cut apart, and that's not all right. After that, Garhan's blade stab into Barolt steel tears through skin as the two charge straight at each other. Only in that clash they both land cuts on each other. Barolt thinks about everything he gave up to become the strongest. He left his tribe, shut out every distraction, and now he's lost so much there's nothing left to take back. Then with a crushing blow to Garhan's back, all anyone sees is an explosion of aura. Then Rolian steps in to block it. She says she's always been thankful to the people who saved her life. Unlike them, she could never do much on her own. She always looked up to Barolt and the others, but beating on an unconscious ally was that really the kind of fight he needed to grow stronger? That makes Barolt realize something. The stronger he got, the easier swords seemed to break. No matter how strong the blade in his hand was, it always snapped in the end, but Garhan's swords never did. When Garhan wakes up he pleads with Barolt. He knows Barolt came with him against his better judgment and admits he can't change justice by himself. He needs the strongest sword at his side. Barolt answers that Garhan is strong and his dream won't be for nothing, but Barolt's own sword feels too light. So he left the group to learn what the strongest sword really means and find his answer. The Prota asks if that means he beat Garhan. Barolt says Garhan is a magic swordsman made for fighting many enemies at once, and in a different kind of battle the winner might have been someone else. The Prota wonders if that was why Garhan chose the wrong path, but Barolt says no, Garhan wasn't the kind of man who changed his resolve that easily. If Barolt had gone with him he probably would have betrayed the goddess too, and then it really would have been the end of the world. Still back then he couldn't understand Garhan, and now he thinks he shouldn't have ended things that way. The Prota says he thinks he gets it. Unlike Barolt, he didn't come from another world, but the Volta and warriors were treated like outsiders by plenty of people. No one around him shared his goal of becoming the strongest even, so he met people along the way, but that journey ended, and maybe he just never noticed. Barolt tells him not to get ahead of himself. The Prota says if you count the years he's already over 40, so he's not that young. Barolt jokes that people talk more when they get old, then says that's enough for one story, but the Prota still asks if Barolt really left the group. How did he end up fighting the people from the other world, and weren't they supposed to have fought together? Barolt remembers Celia. He says this is the most he's talked since speaking with her, and that it's been 20 years since they parted ways. After that he kept searching for more strength, but only got more lost and sank deeper into the abyss. At the bottom of the sea a giant shark appears, and the shark bites him. A newspaper reports that the great Emperor Garhan of Kaldra, a kingdom over 1,000 years old, has joined the war. He had declared that mercy belongs to the gods, while his job is to grind those from another world into dust. The people reading it say things have truly become chaos. In the middle of that talk they bring up Barolt, who borrowed a boat and promised to return it. Then they ask what he even went out to catch. It seems strange because he asked for an anchor to go fishing, and now they see what he caught, a megalodon, and obviously the bait was Barolt himself. The old men start running, ring the bell and tell everyone to get out fast. Barolt thinks this is what a true monster should be, a boat eater. He attacks with a dagger, but it doesn't even scratch the hull and just snaps. Then the shark flings Barolt into the air. The only thing on his mind is getting stronger, but the megalodon comes in to swallow him until someone throws Barolt the anchor. He looks up and catches it. Barolt asks what she's doing there. She says she got tired of waiting for him. Then the shot reveals what's behind her. Barolt grips the anchor, and now the little fish is hooked. That night everyone gets ready with their catch already secured. Later at the tavern the two talk. Barolt says the news from the last 30 years shocked him because of the path he chose and how the world changed. Countless hunters appeared. The Volterra warriors who once worked as mercenaries lost their worth, so an identity crisis hit the clan and fighting among themselves became unavoidable. Barolt thinks he caused all of it in trying to grow stronger. He became a traitor who abandoned the tribe that raised him, but she says the tribe probably just couldn't keep up with the times while living on a small island, and in the end the conservatives won. After her father died the tribe lost its balance, so she became the matriarch. The axe called Giant had been passed down for generations. Barolt says it couldn't have been easy fighting rule breakers with only a lump of metal, especially while injured. She says joining the war will get the tribe enough food for the next 5 years. This isn't just another battle, it's their last chance to raise the tribe's name again, and if all the warriors die then as matriarch she'll protect the tribe to the very end. Barolt can hear her voice shaking, not from fear of war but maybe because he left her behind while chasing strength. Then she asks him to fight beside them. He says he can't. She fires back that Barolt has changed. He's become the kind of man who throws away everything weak just to get stronger, a weak boy who really gave up everything to become the strongest in the world. Then the story cuts to the ship where someone gets punched in the face. Barolt says it's pathetic that a bunch of young fighters can't beat one old man. He tells them not to come back up until they defeat him. His fiancée asks what he's doing. He says going to war with kids who haven't trained their bodies is insane and tells her to go home, but she says sending her back to the tribe to starve is basically the same thing, and she attacks him. Barolt admits she's right. He used to think that things tying him down made his sword heavy, but a sword is supposed to have weight. Then we cut to a place crowded with refugees while warriors battle above them. One fighter says they're fighting for the good of Ratna, wiping out the fools who still believe in the gods. He demands to know where the reinforcements he asked for are, but the other guy tells him to stop whining and finish the target already. He drives his sword into a crack and says anyone above level 30 will be taken to his boss to be dealt with. The other man asks what he's doing. He explains that anyone under level 30 he can kill himself. Then the whole area below bursts into flames. He says he can already smell the experience points until a door comes flying and slams into him like the others from another world. When he dies he crumbles into dust. The pink-haired guy just stares. Then the Baron shows up and says it's pretty shocking that nothing remains after they die. Then he says it's time to begin back on the boat. They explain that Giant is the strongest weapon of the Volterra warriors, like the soul of their people, so how could she hand it over to someone who abandoned the tribe? Once he takes it they may never get Giant back. The matriarch says that's true, but what he's carrying isn't just Giant, it's the tribe's hope to grow stronger. He'll also bear the weight of the tribe. Meanwhile the other guy is stunned, saying it's impossible, how can someone be level 190? Then the man gets split clean in half. The Baron asks if he was a soldier or Calder. The man says yes, and the Baron says perfect. Then he tells Garhan that the reinforcements have arrived. The soldier asks who the reinforcement is, and the answer is simple, the Volterra Baron is the reinforcement. Barolt adds that seeing Garhan again wasn't the hard part, the real problem was something else. Then he hears snoring, and when he looks over the Protus is mocking him in his sleep. Barolt just stares and says the kid's got a lot of nerve. Still he decides not to hit him, especially since the sword he carries is so heavy. He tells him to rest, well, because the real fight starts tomorrow under the moon. A few people talk about whether that giant rock is Callan. Another guy says all they need to do is reach the oasis in the desert. He adds that normally everyone pays a fee, but today is special, so there's a discount, and since they're a group he'll charge even less. The Baron says their goal today is to kill that thing called Angel. He asks if anyone has questions, but the Prota asks whether they shouldn't clear the dungeon first. The other man says that's impossible once the Dungeon closes, every living thing inside gets teleported out. They don't know if the portal would be set outside too, and that would be a huge problem. On top of that, the door the Baron made was already broken, so they need to handle this fast. The Baron asks which idiot broke the door, and the Prota reminds him that he was the one who told him to do it. After that they say goodbye and promise they'll be waiting for them. The Baron asks if the others know Prota is from Earth. He says no and wants to keep it that way. Then they head straight for Angel. The Baron yanks away the pillar supporting Angel from that side. A scream comes from the other side and Prota speaks up. He asks if the plan wasn't to clear the dungeon first and deal with the divine beast after. The Baron says Crossmerg's massive body is tougher than steel and the beams from its horn are even stronger than its claw attacks. Prota figures that's what you'd expect from a divine beast, then wonders why it was so hard to bring down. The Baron says it really wasn't easy. Even after breaking the creature's horn, he still had to find a way to finish it off. That makes Prota stop. Wait, did you actually kill it? The Baron just asks if he never noticed the house was built from Crossmerg's bones. Prota admits he'd been waiting to see if that would give him enough experience to level up. Then he asks if the Baron lied to Celia on purpose. The Baron says he talks too much and shoves him toward the portal. The two of them jump in. Meanwhile, outside, Celia is dealing with a pounding headache. Kavir tells her to drink some water. Celia says the tavern won't be opening today and Watson Effa went out shopping. Still holding her head, she groans that it feels like someone smashed it with a hammer, then asks Kavir what happened last night. Kavir says they were talking about Barolt. Apparently once Celia started drinking, she got really into the topic. That makes her a little embarrassed and she tells Kavir to keep quiet. Kavir says she pieced everything together and decided Celia is a good person even if she's a little rough around the edges. Celia snaps back that of course she is, and nobody needed her whole life story to figure that out. Then she says Kavir wasn't really asking for Barolt's sake, she was asking because of the person traveling with Falada. Kavir pauses to think. After that she admits Celia is right. Celia lets out a sigh. Elsewhere, Effa says she never thought someone as strong as Barolt could still worry about things. Wat replies that Barolt and Protot will probably end up getting along, but Effa says Romeo is always caught in dangerous, weird situations and somehow they always end up being the ones who suffer for it. Wat says there isn't much they can do when they're so much weaker than those two even, so he points out that Effa grows fast and he's sure she can surpass him someday. Effa says that only seems possible because he helped her with the dragon core. Wat says he's just happy he could help and even happier to have her with him. That leaves her wide awake and quiet. She tells herself it's probably just because they're the same species or something like that. Still she can't help thinking maybe it's more special than she wants to admit, because what is a real dragon? Then she remembers what Kavir said about mating and starts wondering if the two of them could actually work. A dragon and a wyvern, would that make a draven or a wygon? Her thoughts keep drifting until Watts asks what she's thinking about. Flustered she blurts out that there's a hair tie over there right then. Out of nowhere a woman crashes into Watts and says she finally found him. Watts asks who she is. She says she thought she'd find him at the oasis, but she's glad to run into him here instead. Then she calls him handsome and Effa is basically like, what are you even saying? The woman keeps begging for help. Watts tells her he's working right now and isn't alone. She brushes that off and says the other girl already left. Watts tries calling out to Effa, but Effa gets mad saying he always ends up going along with whatever girls ask of him. Sure she gets that he has a reputation to keep, but still when she looks again both of them are gone. Then she notices a man watching from a distance talking to someone else. He says Cherry made contact with Watts just like planned and Effa is now walking alone. Richard says the targets still don't realize they're being hunted, but everyone should stay careful and make sure they aren't noticed. Another man says they could just kill everyone, but Richard answers that the people behind this wanted it done quietly. Then he asks Bella for an update and whether she found the target. She says she isn't totally sure, but that girl's build matches. When Richard asks about Cherry, they say she's already glued to Watts, and the other man adds that Cherry is probably too busy having fun with him, but she won't mess up the mission. Richard tells them to keep tracking Walter, and from here on each person is to take down their own target. Then the man fires an arrow. The shot lands on Effa back with Watts. He asks if they're still far from her house and says they need to head back soon. The girl admits she lied about the house and pins him against the wall, staring right into his face. She says it has been a long time since she's seen anyone like him. Watts thinks she's seriously weird and probably dangerous too. Then two men show up and ask what they're doing out here in broad daylight. One of the guys starts talking, but the other says this is Mr. Watts and he shouldn't be somewhere like this. Then the girl suddenly steps away and walks toward the two men. They warn that this is dangerous both for her and for Watts, but she blows them both away. Only then does Watts notice Prota's flyer and learn that the king is dead. He knows Prota couldn't have done it since they left together, so he starts running through other possibilities. Then seeing the two men in front of him, he opens a hole through the middle of each one. The girl says Watts will be taking the blame for all of this. Shocked, he quickly demands to know who she is. She answers that she is Cherry of the Bubbles and she's 14 years old. She also says she's a special investigator for the Fairy Alliance. That throws Watts off and he wonders if this is the same alliance led by Holly, and then he sees what the bubbles can do. One bursts and tears off a piece of the target. Rondell is startled, but he throws fire magic to pop the bubbles, then hurls a stone. Cherry calls that a smart move. As Watts runs, he thinks the only ones who could have killed the king are the four heroes, but his group got framed and now their enemies are probably trying to capture all of them. Cherry says if Watts wants to stop her, he'll have to catch her. Then she starts releasing bubbles all around the crowd and Watts hears people screaming. He realizes this whole thing was a trap and that he has to save Crave, so he fires an ice spell at her, but those bubbles tank the spell. Watts is stunned that she blocked it so easily and realizes he doesn't have his weapon. Cutting back to Hyperion, she had already pulled out the arrow that hit her. Some Eldians are saying they should get her to the tavern fast when a man arrives and says no one should touch her because she's a criminal. One of the Eldians asks what kind of crime a girl like her could even commit, so the man shows the flyer and says Falado Valterra killed the Elf King. He says that charge applies to everyone in the group and his orders are to find them all and deal with them. Then he asks if she might be one of them. Hyperion answers by using the sword's power and lunging in to strike him, but he catches the arrow tip. He says he's impressed, but when he looks again, Hyperion has already slipped away. Her blood trail runs through the crowd as she escapes, and the wound from that arrow seems to have left a mark on her. Hyperion concludes that if the Elf King really died, it was probably the fault of that other man from the dragon nest. Then she leaps down from above and lands on the construction beam. She thinks this should be a good place to hide. The problem is she suddenly sees arrows coming after her because the shots curve through the air. Watching that, she says this doesn't look like wind magic. She uses her sword to block, but one shot still catches her leg. Then the man appears again and fires another arrow at her. Hyperion manages to dodge and jumps down. The man is surprised. He didn't think she could move as fast as his arrows. While falling, Hyperion swings her sword, catches one of the beams, and Rumble blocks one of the man's arrows. He's shocked that she read the path of the shot and defended against it. Hyperion says she's dealt with plenty of cowards like him back when she lived in the forest. She warns him not to underestimate her, then rushes him through the air. He's surprised but still blocks her attack. Then he says any good hunter always has a plan B and fires a second arrow that hits Hyperion. He tells her to say goodbye in an Odyssey flashback. He says that when animals are starving they eat whatever they can. There's no good or evil in it, and in this story he was one of those animals, a young fire dragon who couldn't speak to humans or show his feelings. His wings were too small to join a group, so sooner or later he would have died to humans or monsters, and that would have been the end of him. Back in the present, Odyssey realizes he doesn't have his weapon, so he has to use fire magic to break up the bubbles, yelling for everyone to get out. But by the time he moves, even more people have crowded in. Standing in the middle of the market, he realizes he can't just blast fire everywhere or innocent people will get hurt. Then Cherry drops a bubble toward a child and man. Right before it lands, the bubble pops against Odyssey's back. He jumped in to shield the kid. Cherry is shocked when she notices her wand has frozen over. Odyssey tells her that from this position she's the only one he'll hit, but then she just smiles, calls for help, and turns the villagers against Odyssey, screaming that he's a stalker and a terrorist. Then others join in, saying dead bodies were found in the pit he came from. Odyssey looks up at a giant bubble and realizes people fear what they don't understand when they're trapped like this and can't run. Fear turns into violence. That's when people start seeing you as a monster that destroys everything. That's how his sister used to see dragons too, and why she told him he should never reveal himself in public. Odyssey questions that she was the one who took him and raised him like a person and didn't kill him like some beast. Without her he never would have known pain like this, or why she had to carry that curse. Then he remembers her saying human lives are short and 40 years had passed since they met. No matter what she believed, he would learn there are more feelings than just sadness and joy. Maybe one day he'd understand what it means to protect something, the same feeling that made her save him. To Odyssey, she had something no dragon could even imagine. Because of her he learned mercy, right and wrong, so that's what he chooses now. And yeah, Odyssey starts growing. The kid is huge now. Cherry just blurts out, "Oh, a dragon," and gets grabbed right in his mouth. Now everyone panics because come on, it's a freaking dragon. People run away screaming, but Odyssey roars for everyone to stop, line up and leave calmly, and somehow they listen. Cherry is thrown off. She says nobody ever mentioned there was a dragon in the group. That means Attis' identity really well. Still, she can't believe he revealed himself so easily just to protect humans. Even more surprising, she blocks the attack with a bubble shield. Attis realizes her bubbles are tougher than he thought, and she casts them fast too, but Cherry says humans will never be grateful to a dragon. No matter what he does, they'll try to kill him, so she'll help by killing them first. She unleashes a storm of bubbles, but Attis beats his wings once and sends them flying back at her. Attis tells her he knows humans fear dragons, but that's exactly why he has to stand with them. Then he pulls in another blast of fire for Cherry, but she only says he looks very lonely. Meanwhile, back with a fear, right as she's about to be hit, she senses fire energy coming and with a hard shove manages to dodge the attacker. The man snaps that he's tired of this and tells her to stay still so he can finish it quickly. If Fear answers with his own words, "A good hunter always has a plan B," and points down. He says he won't fall for some cheap trick like that, but when he finally looks, a tower of fire is already crashing toward him. If Fear mutters that was way too close, she almost got cooked too. Then she sees Attis blasted a hole straight through everything. That brings back his sister's warning. Even if he tries to live for humans, dragons will still be seen as symbols of destruction. Most dragons really are like that, so when people realize a dragon just saved them, it's a shock. His sister had hoped that if even one dragon could truly reach people, maybe things could start to change. As the boy gives thanks, the bubbles all vanish like foam. Cherry warns Attis not to trust humans even if they thank him. Now later they'll spread rumors and turn on him. That's why too her killing everyone is simpler. That sets Attis off and he throws fire at her, but the bubble shield holds, and Attis says these people had nothing to do with any of this, even so he'll never forgive her. Cherry likes that look on his face and says she'd love to see him in human form too. Then she attacks Attis again and the bubbles tear into his wings. Attis says shocked that her magic can pierce scales tougher than armor. Cherry says he must be surprised. He probably thought he could beat her, but not a chance. Even when his flames hit her and burn her clothes, she's still fine. She says she's level 93 while his only a level 80 lizard. That's when Attis realizes she's a Tarikio. Then she traps his neck in a bubble. Another memory hits him. His sister once asked him to go out into the world. He promised to travel, meet all kinds of people, keep learning, and most of all find someone who would stay by his side. At that exact moment, the dragon amulet appears, warping Attis' body, and a fear saves him. At the last second, she asks if he finally learned from this mistake and tells him never to help strange girls again. Attis just says Thanks. Cherry though looks furious. At the Oasis Tavern, Bella talks with the two women there. She says she heard any useful information would be with Syria, at least that's what the guy on the floor told her. Then she adds she didn't drag him there. She also asks why the woman beside Syria keeps staring at her. Syria says she's in a messy situation, so of course she'd have a guard. Still she apologizes if it's making Bella uneasy. The information Bella wants is about where a man named Falato been, or Valterra is. Bella says Valterra has already been found. The one she's really after is a woman named Crave. Cedric replies that at the Oasis information is power, so she wants to know what Bella can offer. Bella taps the photo and says she didn't bring money, so maybe sparing Cedric's life is payment enough. Cedric says she gets it. With that settled, she tells her guard to go after Crave in the others and promises a bonus later. Crave says she understands and leaves. Bella comments that Cedric works fast. Meanwhile, Crave thinks these people were probably sent by Garhan and Zenovia. If that's true, they won't be easy to handle, so she has to move quickly. Bella says chasing down Crave and her group would be a pain, but it'd be even worse if there were more helpers out there, so she's glad they found one of those allies this easily. And even better, Crave's messenger too. Then boom, one strike to the neck, going back to the moment when Afer uses the amulet to force Addis out of dragon form. She asks who that woman is. He says she's a Teresha, probably sent by the four heroes, but there's one problem. He says back is full of holes. He says he got hit while he was in dragon form. Cherry complains that being alone with Addis was getting fun, so why did Eddie Spear have to interrupt Eddie's answers by hurling an ice block at her bubble? And yeah, this weapon is seriously strong. He says he'll hold Cherry off and tells Eddie Spear to go, but she refuses to run away by herself. Cherry just stands there inside the ice with that crazy look on her face. Addis explains that she's level 92 and this weapon probably won't keep her trapped for long. This fire has to go after Proda and Crave, and he apologizes for asking, but she's the only one fast enough to do it. Then the ice starts cracking and exploding outward. By the time Cherry looks again, the two of them are already gone. She says if they want to play chase, she'll just use a little trick, then covers the whole area with a giant bubble near the barrier as fire tries to break through, but it doesn't work. Addis starts making a plan, saying he'll distract Cherry and Afire should move when she gets a chance, but Afire cuts him off. She says no, she's run away too many times already, and every time she did, people died. In the end, she was always the one left alive. She won't leave Addis behind. She won't abandon someone so important to her. Hearing that, Addis remembers his sister's wish again. Then a huge crash echoes out and they realize Cherry is tearing the place apart. She keeps shouting for them to come out or she'll destroy everything, as Fire knows it's only a matter of time before they're found, and she starts thinking of what to do. Then Addis takes her hand and reminds her that she sensed and redirected his fire a moment ago. He explains again Cherry is level 92 and he's only level 80 even in dragon form. That form gives him power, but it makes him slow and turns him into an easy target for a mage. In the end, he can't beat her. His fire says she's not leaving him. Addis is saying knows that, but there is one thing he can try, even if he hates it. If Ather has a dragon core like his, this might work. He starts the transfer. Addis pours his energy into Ather and Cherry spots the light right away. She throws up a bubble barrier and starts blasting everything around them, but more and more glowing points appear, shining brighter, and even she can't tell what's happening. They explain that dragons live a very long time, and because of that a dragon needs 10 to 20 times more life force to level up than an Einvern, so to raise a fire's level, Addis gathers his own life force and sent it straight into her. And yeah, she's shocked. Cherry notices Afire is only level 62 and thinks that kind of increase won't matter much now. What she doesn't realize is this Afire is already right beside her. Cherry says speed alone won't be enough to beat her, but then something strange happens. Every time Cherry looks at Afire, her level jumps by 1, then she looks again and the level rises again. 65, 66, 67, and Afire keeps attacking again and again. Cherry can only stare, wondering how Fire's level is climbing this fast while she's getting knocked around like a ping pong ball sent flying everywhere. As a fire keeps landing, hits a strike, slams into Cherry's stomach, sending her airborne, and a fire flashes behind her over and over. Cherry admits she has no idea what a fire did, but she can tell a fire is at her limit. Mana is pouring out of her. Cherry says none of this will change anything. Every second a fire keeps this up, she's burning away her own life. She even wonders if a tease was worth this much, saying a fire shouldn't be able to fight like this. A fire doesn't care though and comes at her with everything she has, but the bubble is absurdly tough. The fire is shocked it held, and worse, she gets trapped inside another bubble. Cherry grins and says the game is over now. Then she crushes the bubble, but Atiz notices that even before it burst, a fear had already escaped. Cherry starts wondering what kind of monster this girl really is, because a fear is already level 85. A fear screams and dives straight at Cherry. Cherry calls her an idiot for throwing her life away like this. She says a fear's feelings mean nothing because deep down she's just a coward. Then a fear swings with everything she has and tears through the bubble. For the first time it finally shatters. Even then a fear says this was probably Atiz's story to live, not hers. Cherry says no, this really is a fear story, and stories like this don't get happy endings because a fear still can't beat her. But when she looks again, a fear is already forming another attack around the bubble, saying it really would have been impossible if she were alone. Then from far away someone else appears. Atiz and Trumbull are there too, and my friends, a shock goes right through Cherry's chest. Against Trumbull, levels don't mean much. Cherry just sighs, wondering why every handsome guy is already taken. Then she turns to dust. Atiz says it's a good thing he learned how to shoot from Romnir before collapsing to the ground. A fear rushes to catch him and says they need to go back, but the two of them fall together. Fear looks at Tease and says they did it and now they have to return and fight for the others. She apologizes as the energy fades away until all that's left is a single footstep beside them. Then back at the tavern, Saria's neck is shown and it looks like Crave managed to stop the bleeding with bandages even so she's still fighting. Bella already says she expected the goddess's envoy to be much stronger, but Crave is only level 80. Bella keeps pressing her, mocking how weak the goddess's envoy seems. Crave realizes Bella is a Tarikio but gets kicked hard in the stomach. Bella says things are very different from 20 years ago and since she can't kill the goddess she'll just cut off her leg so she can't run, but then Crave activates the goddess's power and Bella's system starts failing, saying abilities can't be used against the goddess. She gets so weak she can't even lift her axe. A hit to the face follows and Crave says this is her true strength. Without those fake powers Bella is nothing before the goddess's authority. Bella tells her to stop talking nonsense but still misses her attack. Crave thinks the move she's about to use wouldn't work on Prota but it should work on a Tarikio with a guide. She says Bella is just a normal person with a high level. Bella is stunned realizing that just sealing her guide made her this weak. Saria also sees that the goddess's envoy can fight a Tarikio even at a lower level. Then suddenly someone appears behind Crave. Saria shouts to warn her so Crave can block in time even with the goddess's power active. Crave is shocked that this man still deflected such a strong attack. Richard asks if Bella is alright but she tells him to forget that and asks why he's here. Wasn't she supposed to be the one capturing the goddess's envoy? Richard realizes who Crave is and charges straight at her. Crave is sure he shouldn't be able to use a guide but he still uses aura. In the end this man trained in a style similar to Ramnia's. Richard asks if what the goddess is doing is really for the good of Ramnia's. Then Bella orders Crave to stop or she'll snap Saria's neck. She tells Crave to surrender quietly. Crave thinks the only thing she can do now is keep the guide unusable. Still her own skills aren't enough and if she gets captured everything will go just as Garhan planned. Then Saria reveals the emergency signal she was given for Prota. Crave thinks that if Prota comes back things might still turn around so she drops her spear and says she'll go with them if they don't hurt Saria. Bella mocks her, saying who would have thought the goddess's envoy would do that, but Crave says they need to answer one thing first. If her existence gets in the way they could just kill her, so why did Garhan and Zenovia order them to capture her instead? Richard explains that the envoy is an avatar carrying part of the goddess's power. If Garhan kills her himself he can take even more of that power and become a god that leaves both Crave and Bella stunned. Crave asks if Garhan plans to become a god so he can control the goddess of darkness and says that even now the world is under attack from the demon gods dungeons and the Tarakias. If the goddess of darkness truly disappears Ormphalus's invasion will be unstoppable. The moment she is handed over to Garhan this world is doomed. Richard says that's right but tells her not to worry, if he kills her now things won't go the way Garhan planned. His sword swings toward Crave and Bella and Saria freeze while IFA suddenly appears saying they need help, but the one holding IFA back is Jang. He says they're still in the middle of treatment. IFA thanks him but says they still need to help Miss Crave. Jang tells them not to worry, even if he doesn't know who she is no evil will be allowed to rise against that person. Then he sees Crave trapped inside the Inquisitor's barrier and the Inquisitor begins listing the charges: torturing and killing 36 caravan nomads, causing many civilian deaths in Kala and carrying out countless acts of terror in the past. He says everyone here will answer for their crimes. Richard can only say so it's you, the Inquisitor of Heresy. Richard quickly says the Inquisitor has the wrong people. They're an investigation team from the Fairy Alliance and the person in front of him, but Leon Hart cuts him off saying that would make Richard the assassin of the Elf King. So now Richard wants to tell the Inquisitor of all people to leave because they're such a trustworthy group. Still there's one problem: if these special investigators are Teratius and high-ranking ones from the Great Land, that changes everything. Leon Hart calls Richard out directly and Richard realizes Holian may be moving behind the Inquisitors. Crave says she isn't the only target. The heroes are attacking the goddess of darkness and stealing her power so they can become new gods. Leon Hart asks who she is to make a claim like that and she answers that she is Crave, created and sent by the goddess. Leon Hart says she sounds completely insane, but Crave fires back: if she really was sent by the goddess then why would the goddess choose a man like Valterra to help with the mission? Then Crave suddenly warns him to be careful. Barolt lunges at Leon Hart but gets smashed away at once. Leon Hart says no one would believe a story about someone attacking the goddess to become one, but if it's the four great heroes then yes, that's very possible. Richard jumps at him next but Leon Hart says he'll be the one asking questions. Meanwhile Prota is fighting the angels and says the Tarakias normally can't attack angels, more exactly those with a guide can't fight them. That's because both angels and Tarakias were sent by Ormphalus, so why do the Tarakias have to die for the angels? He stops to think, well, only after an angel bites him and he comes back out of its mouth anyway. He figures out that if he attacks with his eyes closed he won't get interference from the system, so he bites back at the angel but his sword still can't handle it. Barolt says Prota's blade broke again and Prota answers that at least this one lasted much longer than before. It's not like he can't just make another one. Barolt asks if he killed all of those as an angel. Prota says yes, but it doesn't make sense since he isn't getting experience points. Barolt explains that experience points aren't really numbers, they're actual experience. In the end Prota is becoming more useful. Prota says now he gets why Barolt has no disciples. Barolt tells them to move on to the next spot and orders Prota to spread his aura through his whole body, but Prota tells him to rest. For a bit first he's already lost count of how many angels he's killed. Barolt tells him to quit if he needs a break. He was even thinking about teaching him a special move to level up faster. Prota fires back that he's already rested. As Prota starts gathering his aura, he remembers he's still only level 5 while Barolt is level 200. If the other heroes are around that strong too, then he has a long way to go. That also makes him wonder how Barolt shows up in the guide. Barolt cuts off his thoughts and tells him to focus. Prota asks if he means pushing aura outward, but he still doesn't really get it. All Barolt gives him is put power into it, squeeze it, condense it. Prota thinks that explanation is awful, but he tries anyway. As the energy starts wrapping around him, Prota pushes harder. His aura bursts out, but Barolt just says he failed again, exactly like he expected. Prota asks if that was supposed to become some kind of explosion skill. Barolt says that since he's still in one piece, they can keep trying. Prota grumbles that at this rate he's going to wreck his whole body. Then a pendant slips from his pocket. Seeing it, he remembers Celia gave it to him back at Barolt's house. The twins are talking about the decorations. They insist the place needed a more feminine touch. Then they hear something outside. When they check, they ask if Martin is okay. He says he finally did it. The twins realize Martin managed to awaken his aura and they're so happy they nearly cry. Another noise comes from outside and Martin guesses Barolt and Prota are back, but when they look it's only the man from the mainland back with Prota. He wonders if the pendant isn't Celia's signal. Even Barolt sounds surprised she sent one. Prota points out that his friends are up there and if Celia is calling too then something must be wrong. Barolt agrees it has to be serious, right? Then another swarm of angels appears. Prota can only wonder how many are left. Then Barolt starts explaining something important. He says the Voltrons are only allowed to kill in 3 cases: if the target is a monster, if the target wants death, or under special conditions. Prota blurts out who would ever want that. Barolt says that's why they ask 3 times first to make sure the person truly wants to die. Prota mutters that they're weirdly pushy about it. Barolt moves in and wipes out the angels. Then he gives the 3rd condition, killing to protect someone with that. He tells Prota to hurry back, help his friends and make sure Celia is safe too. Prota asks if he's really sure about this, but Barolt tells him to go, so Prota takes off at once. Meanwhile Martin is being healed. The mainland man says it would be a miracle for someone to beat an enemy 50 levels above him, but if Martin somehow wins they'll leave peacefully. Another one snaps that he has no plan to leave. They burned his friend alive. The one with the con-shaped helmet says those burns are nothing next to his healing. Martin realizes they're just toying with him. The twins try to fire him up, promising he won't lose and that they'll keep healing him as long as needed. Martin swears he'll beat these Tarakios. Then an arrow suddenly flies in and strikes one of the twins. The enemies start joking around, betting gold on how many deadly wounds Martin can take. Her sister panics and tries to save her while Martin, furious, charges the swordsman, but the man dodges and counters right away. Martin says they aren't even human. He smashes up the ground, but the swordsman slips away again. Martin roars, asking who they think they are, treating people like they're nothing. Then he gets hit from behind. The swordsman coldly says they're just 2 weak people who can't even stand before them, don't deserve pity. Martin spits back that trash like them will never understand the strength it takes to protect friends. With an angry scream he unleashes his aura, but the swordsman cuts straight through him in one move and says that in any world being weak is a crime. Then he orders the remaining twin to heal Martin so the game can keep going. He goes on saying weak people like them should stay bowed down. The other attacker gets annoyed and tells him to stop talking. If the last healer dies no one can patch Martin up and the fun ends, so he readies another shot at the other twin, but she tells him to do it to kill them already instead of treating them like toys, because in the end they'll all die by Barolt's hand. The second she says his name everyone freezes. One of them yells asking if she really said Barolt. Another demands to know what connection they have to that monster, figuring she must be lying. Still one decides it's safer if she dies. Now the arrow launches straight at her and a wooden sword appears in the way. Protha arrives, staring them down. The twin looks up and sees Protha watching from a distance. The enemies start laughing. They joke that they thought their guide was broken, but this must be the so-called Volta, and Brat and his only level 5. One asks if he's really a Volta and warrior. Protha answers that if they want to know they can come test him. Then he tells the twin to keep healing the others. She says that won't be easy. Her spiritual power isn't perfect and wounds caused by one of the 4 spiritual powers are fatal. Injuries can't be fully healed at her level. Saving them is impossible. Protha only asks how long they can hold on. She says maybe 10 minutes, more like 5. He checks his blade, fixes it back in place and says that's plenty of time. He just needs her to wait a little longer. She agrees, then keeps healing the others. The enemy group says that's enough messing around. They came to the dungeon to kill the rest of the hunters. One of them even apologizes for what the others said, but facing a level 5 is still a complete joke. He activates a high level skill against Protha, causing a huge blast. While the others keep chatting, they brag that the reward was way too big for something this easy. Then one asks why it's taking so long. Didn't the fast one finish him yet? But when they look, that fighter's sword is bent and he's twisted up on the ground. Protha asks if they really thought he'd let them walk away. The others can only stare, wondering what he is. Protha tells the healer to patch up his friends right now. The man with the helmet asks why he should. Protha says that after he heals them he still wants an apology, and if his friends forgive him maybe he'll go a little easier. The healer refuses, casts a strong recovery spell on his ally, and that man jumps back in with another powerful skill. At the same time the other attacker joins in with one of his own. The whole place lights up and the floor gets torn apart, but Protha blocks everything. Not only that, he counters, driving a kick into one of them. The man tries to strike again and Protha sends the same hit right back. An arrow comes at him but he deflects it. Now the archer is rattled, wondering if this guy is really level 5, but all he draws a massive bow skill and fires. Protha sees he can't dodge, his friends are directly behind him, so he grabs a small stone and throws it with everything he has at the arrow. The archer is stunned, wondering how that attack got stopped, and the stone Even whips back and slams into him too. The other killer uses a cloning skill and demands to know how Protha dared attack his little brother. Protha repeats little brother, then he attacks, wiping out the clones with a tornado strike. The real one appears behind him and swings to kill, but Protha catches the blow with his hand. The man can't believe his attack got blocked. Protha twists his arm and says it's time to stop playing games as he remembers something. He admits he knows the Retenians hate the Tarikio. Since he's only level 5, he hasn't lived through that hatred himself, but he understands how easy it would be to kill someone without even noticing or get used by someone else. So Protha tells him they're being manipulated by Garhan. The man asks if Protha means he'd be spared if he surrendered, then he laughs, saying maybe he would have believed that 20 years ago, but now it's too late. Poison starts spreading up Protha's arm and he realizes he can't move it. At the same time, more arrows fly toward him. Protha grips his sword as the man explains that paralysis poison works even better on people with strong muscles. He admits Protha's offer wasn't bad, but it annoys him because Richard said the same thing. That makes Protha ask if Richard is the leader of the Great Land. The swordsman mocks the idea, asking if Avolta and really thinks Richard leads the Great Land. He says the nation Richard built with Gayan is fake. Richard is just a ghost moving under Gayan's orders because he can't break the seal's magic, but they're different, and if Richard hadn't handed them over, the four great heroes would never have existed. Protha asks if that means they're the real mainlanders who started the war 20 years ago. The man says yes, they are the true Great Land. Then the poison starts spreading back again, so Protha snaps that if these people are the reason he had to live in hiding, then they're the sick bastards who enjoyed killing Retenians. The guy can't believe it. Protha is burning the poison away with his aura, and that makes him look way more dangerous. Then the other one slices the boy's arm with a knife. Better to lose an arm than his life. After that, the two exchange a quick look. They decide to rush him together because this is their only opening with his sword lowered, but right then Protha pulls out the bayonet. The moment they see that scarlet blade, they remember what happened when they faced Barolt back then. Someone saved them, but now there's no third chance. Protha cuts through both of them, and all they see after that is the blast. Even the twin is stunned while the samurai starts laughing. He calls it incredible. Those two were weaker than him, sure, but they still weren't weak, and that sword split them clean in half. On top of that, the power behind it is insane. Then he checks again and realizes his guide can't even read the enemy's level, so he shouts sepulchre. Protha faces him and says people show their real strength when death is right in front of them. With the blade's aura, that power gets poured straight into his body. Then the samurai powers up and declares that Protha should witness his full greatness before charging him head on, but Protha's sword just drives straight through his head, and just like that it's over. The healer freezes in fear. He drops to the ground, saying he isn't even from the mainland and never had a choice. Protha lifts his sword, aims at him, and says again that his friend needs treatment. If he wants to live, he knows what to do. Then we cut to Laudan asking whether the little boy has any family in the city, but the kid stays quiet and still lets Laudan carry him. Laudan grumbles to himself that Leonhardt always leaves him the boring jobs. When suddenly an explosion hits the top of the tower, Laudan figures it has to be the Inquisitor. Leonhardt says it's been a long time since he saw a Taraquian run just from seeing his level, then asks if Richard doesn't even know his own. Richard answers that Leonhardt has no idea what he's talking about, and this isn't the time for long speeches. Then he unleashes a blast of aura and prana. Lord takes the boy and leaves, muttering that only crazy people would fight in a place like this. The boy sees a vision almost like the one from the caravan while they run there. Meanwhile, Bella is thinking that Richard is level 125 and the Inquisitor is level 140, so the winner should be obvious. Then Kivya asks if that man's name was Richard and why he betrayed Garhan to save the Retenian. Bella says she doesn't know. After all, Richard betrayed them first. He told them he made a deal with Garhan. If the Taraquians surrendered, they'd be treated the same as the Retenians, kept his prisoners for a while, then released later. Since not all Taraquians wanted war, a lot of them believed him. In the end, they envied the ones who died fighting in Arthur the Dungeon of Heaven. Even if Richard claimed it wasn't his idea, they still rotted there for 20 years. He said his family died because of the Retenians, and Bella can't understand what was going on in his head. Syria says that compared to the cruel things the Taraquians did, being locked up for a while was generous, but Bella tells her to shut it because the goddesses branded the Taraquians as demon sent and the Retenians were the ones who tried to wipe them out. Kivya says that's not true. The goddesses never gave that order. If Bella had lived as a Retenian, she would have been treated like one and the goddesses would have accepted them. Bella calls that a lie. If that were true, then what were the Inquisitors for? Kivya explains they're meant to reduce conflict between Taraquians and Retenians. Bella argues that it still meant getting captured the moment you were identified, and if you didn't surrender you'd be forced to fight. Kivya says the Inquisitors only used violence against Taraquians who were criminals. Meanwhile, Leonhardt's fight keeps going and he lands a punch right in Richard's face, wrecking everything around them. Syria asks why the war even started. Was it really all because of a rumor? Kivya says it's hard to know. Maybe it started on its own, or maybe someone spread it on purpose. At the same time, Leonhardt asks if Garhan was behind those rumors, and Richard says yes, one of the four heroes, the worst one, set this plan in motion 20 years ago. He spread hatred for the Taraquians like a plague, and it kept feeding itself in an endless cycle. A rumor that Brotherhood couldn't stop. Leonhardt asks if that's really true, then what does it have to do with him since he's a Taraquian? Richard says it's because Leonhardt knows what it's like to lose the people he loves. Leonhardt asks so his family die because of that hatred, and this is supposed to be revenge. Richard says if the goddess's envoy dies, Garhan's plans become useless and Ratna will finally have peace. If Leonhardt wants to stop more suffering and truly wants peace for Ratna, then he should move aside. With that, Richard launches a piercing aura attack. The problem is that blast is heading straight for Lady in the back. Even Richard is shocked when he notices it, but Leonhardt says Richard got one thing very wrong and deflects the attack. Then he says that now the goddesses envoy has appeared. His only duty is to protect her and obey her orders. Nothing else matters. Richard asks if he's really saying Rutinian lives don't matter next to the goddess's goal. If so, then in the end he's no different from the Rutinians or even Garhan. Leonhardt says that's a little insulting because he's an inquisitor of the Brotherhood of Shadows and no matter the situation he won't act for anyone but Kavir. Then he reveals that he's been protecting everyone in the city. Richard finally understands that during this whole fight Leonhardt was guarding the entire city, and only then does he grasp how strong Leonhardt really is. Leonhardt says that no matter how many excuses Richard gives, his sins won't vanish. Then he uses a sealing skill on Richard. Not only that, he forms a guillotine with his judgment pillar's ability and declares that in Kavir's name he will judge his crimes with death. But right then Kavir tells him to stop. If Richard dies now, Garhan and Zenovia will sense it through the magic on him. It's better to keep him alive and trapped, and she learned that from Richard's partner. His shop that Bella would do that. Kavir says killing Rutinians and trying to kill the goddess's envoy are serious crimes. Still, for now, working with him is more useful than punishing him, but Leonhardt insists he must act for the goddess of darkness and says again that in Kavir's name he will punish those crimes. Kavir steps in again and asks if he didn't hear her. She's the goddess's envoy and she's ordering him to stop now, so Leonhardt asks if she's really Kavir's envoy, then why? When suddenly Prota flies right into his face, he demands to know what Leonhardt thinks he's doing, then asks if Kavir is hurt and whether he came too late. Either way, he says he'll settle this now, but Kavir tells him it's already too late for that. Prota turns on Leonhardt and asks who the hell he thinks he is. Just because he's some high-ranking priest doesn't mean he can treat the goddess's envoy like that. Leonhardt shoots back that he can't believe an idiot like Prota was chosen to work with the goddess, and even figures he probably threatened her. The two start trading insults until Zong steps in and tells them to calm down. Then he adds that if he remembers right, Prota lost their last fight. Prota starts arguing that he didn't lose, but then he notices Zong is actually there and admits this is pretty awkward. Prota looks at Leonhardt waiting for an explanation, and Leonhardt says that back then the situation called for something that made it look like Zong had died, so Prota gets excited. He says Zong should have warned him, but Zong points out there are no cell phones here to make that easy. The problem is Martin asks why Tarakian is still alive, so Zong asks if it's because of him that people died. Martin starts yelling that he'll make sure to kill him for good. Then Prota drops to his knees and begs him to stop apologizing too. Martin asks why Prota is apologizing. If Prota knows what Tarakians are like, then why is he doing this? Prota says it's because he's a Tarakian too and he won't ask Martin to forgive them for lying or to forget Brad's death, but Martin needs to believe one thing: Zong was being used, he wasn't in control of himself. Then Prota knows it sounds shameless to say not all Tarakians are trash, but he begs Martin to believe him. Martin gets really upset, drops the knife and walks away. Prota quietly says thank you. Jeng says it's all his fault, but Prota calls him an idiot. He was the one who said he wanted a world where Tarakians and Hachions could live together, so the least he can do is help make that happen. Laura mutters that Prota really is a Tarakian, what a bastard. Then Hatching Appropriate say they actually managed to defeat a level 80 Tarakian. Kavir brags that she beat a Tarakia by herself, and Prota points out that she has a natural edge against them. Then Loda shows up at the same time. Leonhardt forces Zong Denil in front of Kavir, and finally everyone ends up together, and even Richard looks relieved. Then the Canhead says that if Richard drops his strings he can use his magic again. Richard tells everyone to stop, there's no reason to keep fighting, and he'll accept whatever punishment comes. The Canhead mocks him, asking why he escaped the floating dungeon. If that was true, did he really want the Inquisitors to catch him? But then someone grabs the knife and drives it straight into the Canhead's neck. It was the kid. Richard freezes in place. The boy looks completely shaken, which makes sense. The Canhead was the one who poisoned him and made him suffer. Lord Ice quickly pulls the kid away. The Canhead says he should have loved him, then crumbles into dust. Garhan says this must be the limit for the Tarakios. More than half of them are dead, so the plan likely failed. Zenovia asks if he ever really expected much from them, then says that now they know the location they can finally carry out divine punishment. Kavir starts to send something wrong. Meanwhile, one of the twins asks Martin if he's okay, and he admits he feels pathetic. The Canhead knew Martin threw the spear, and even after his friend supposedly died because of it, he still kept him alive. Then Martin thinks about what Brad would probably say and imagines Brad calling him an idiot. If someone saved your life 2 or 3 times, then you owe them. The twin plays along as Brad and Martin finally agrees, but while they're talking the sky suddenly goes dark. A single bolt of lightning strikes, and Garhan says if they really believe that, then the fair thing is to give up their lives in an instant. Heads go flying. Garhan calls it divine punishment. Everyone is stunned by Garhan's sudden arrival. Then he comes in with a sort of lightning. Not even Leonhardt sensed him coming. Garhan's killing intent is overwhelming and no one is ready for the attack, so the only thing Leonhardt can think to do is save as many people as possible, but Garhan's magic boxes him in, and it looks like Garhan planned that from the start. He says it's a problem that his identity was exposed, but he doesn't want to kill Leonhardt. A level 140 spiritualist dying would be a huge loss for Ratner. Leonhardt realizes Garhan used an artificial guide and demands to know where Kivya is. Garhan tells him not to worry about the goddess's envoy, he'll keep her alive as long as she's still useful. Then he warns that the real trouble starts once she disappears. After that, he'll become the new god of darkness and Leonhardt will swear loyalty to him. Leonhardt answers that he is Kivya's priest and as long as the envoy lives he'll follow her command. Garhan says that works for him too. Leonhardt can't even see Garhan's level his borrowing the goddess's power. Then he demands to know why Garhan killed them. Those people had nothing to do with this. Garhan looks down on the person the goddess chose, just an earthling. Pathetic. Then Kivya reacts to an attack. What was that? She had expected Garhan and Zenovia to make a move, but Garhan himself showed up. That means they've probably reached the final stage of their plan. Kivia thinks this can't be allowed to happen. Even if it costs her life, she has to stop it, but Prota cuts in. He tells them to buy time and reminds her why they came to Kalen. She just needs to take any route down to the deepest part of the dungeon. Kivia takes off running and orders Romeo not to die. He answers yes. As she runs, Kivia thinks Barolt is the only one who can stop Garhan. She just has to bring him there. They only need to hold out a little longer, but then with flashes of light both of them are blasted away. Garhan appears right in front of Kivia and says nothing will change. Trying to buy time won't matter, and for them it was impossible from the start. Then Kivia sees Prota unconscious along with Leonhardt. Garhan says it's almost inspiring how worried she still is about her friends even now. Kivia says Garhan shouldn't have been able to return to this plane after sealing the goddess and taking her power, so how did he do it? He replies that the preparation for his ascension is already complete. Kivia says it's impossible to absorb that much power so fast. Garhan answers that the blessings of Ormflus projected by Zenovia were incredibly strong. They helped unseal the goddess's powers with ease, but even after everything he absorbed, one piece is still missing: the knowledge and information needed to control that massive divine power, the part Kivia sealed away in a human form and hid. Now he's going to take it back, and he starts absorbing Kivia's energy. He continues draining Kivia's power. The space around them begins to twist, and even in the elf kingdom the king says day turning into night like this is a terrible sign. At the Inquisitor's palace they wonder what Kivia is doing. The clairvoyant says this wild darkness does not belong to the goddess, just like Leonhardt suspected someone else is using her power. That has never happened in Ratna's history. This world is protected by the balance of the 6 goddesses, and the moment that darkness breaks that balance, the fangs will appear. Then the demons of Ormflus will come out. Everything starts being swallowed by the fangs, and the so-called angels flee while devouring people. Kivia begs Garhan to stop. The power of darkness is something no human can control, and if the fangs keep growing there may be no way back. She asks if this is really the Ratna he wants and whether he can hear the screams of innocent people. Garhan says he hears them clearly, but asks if the goddesses ever cared. He talks about the screams of people dying, the helpless ones with no power to fight monsters, the people who lost family to the Taracios, and those who live for revenge. In the end all they're left with is anger because no one listens to them. As he says that a giant fang opens, a huge monster comes out of it. Garhan finally lets Kiwi go and says all that despair is exactly why he chose to become a god. To him this is how suffering ends. Kiwi tells him that no matter how much power he steals from the goddess, he'll never control it the right way. Things won't go the way he expects. Then Barolt says he knew the goddess would try to persuade him. He steps out of the fang and says he was wondering why so many had suddenly appeared. Now he sees the one behind it all as a familiar face, and Garhan clearly isn't here for a friendly visit. Garhan stares him down. Kiwi says this is a huge relief. As Garhan walks toward Barolt he asks him to come along, saying he already knows Barolt has less than 4 months left to live. Barolt answers that if Garhan still remembers that his honored. Garhan says that if things keep going like this, all the skills, strength and experience Barolt worked so long for will turn into nothing, all because the goddess decided it that way. So what was the point of any of it? Zenovia was against this, but if it's Barolt, Garhan is willing to share this power once again. He asks him to save Ratna with him because together they can change the present. Barolt says that if Garhan really had the power to do that, maybe things would be different, but Ratna has had enough of this nonsense. People are dying right now like they're nothing but sacrifices. He calls Garhan a rebellious kid hitting puberty and asks if he really thinks this is saving the world, because there are people willing to give themselves up before letting others do it. Some keep fighting while protecting everyone they can, even if they have to stay hidden, and even the ones who can't save others still keep a smile on their face. There are far more good people in this world than idiots like Garhan. Garhan just says Barolt talks too much. Then he grabs Barolt's sword and hurls it toward Prota. Barolt moves first, striking Prota in the stomach and catching the sword at the same time. Prota drops unconscious. Barolt just laughs and says the boy's habit of attacking people he hates reminds him of when they were younger. Garhan asks what he's talking about. Prota is just a Tarikio sent by Ormflus with no emotions, only empty words. Barolt asks if those words were really empty. If they were, then why was Garhan so on guard against the boy's aura? And the funny part is Barolt still hasn't released his aura yet. That leaves Garhan stunned. He thought that terrifying pressure came from Barolt, but it was all Prota. Meanwhile Zong grabs Kivia and escapes using a dark step skill so they won't be noticed, but Garhan sees them anyway. He says he didn't know there was still a live rat left, but Barolt releases part of his aura and now Garhan gets a taste of Barolt's true power. Barolt asks where Garhan thinks he's going. After all, Barolt himself is the final wall standing in the way of what Garhan wants. Garhan says that answer is enough in the end. While Zong takes Kivia away, Leonhardt carries Prota. Prota tells Leonhardt to put him down because Garhan needs to die. Leonhardt shuts him down and says that no matter how badly he wants to fight too, his job is to protect the goddess's envoy right now. He can't do anything else. Still he warns Prota not to think about stepping in. Prota has no idea what a true Valterra really is. When Prota looks back he realizes this is the true power of the Sword King, and all that energy starts to rise. Aura started gathering into one spot. The body is like a container and every container has a limit. It can only hold so much aura, but if all that energy is released first you can pull in far more aura than the body should normally handle. Still that takes insane focus, like picking up grains of sand from a whole beach without dropping even one. In that state nobody dared move carelessly. Even Garhan could only watch, and just like coal can become a diamond under huge pressure, all that aura packed into one point created something greater than aura itself, something no one had ever seen. Everyone was stunned by the birth of a new divine power, a godlike force taking shape through the Valterra's fighting spirit. You really are incredible, Barolt. You've gone past everything I expected. I never thought you'd forge a divine power with your own strength. It's still unfinished compared to your darkness, but you still made it. Somehow you step beyond what even a demigod planned. Garhan snaps back, telling him not to mess with him. So this is the power of the gods now. Even the winner isn't certain. Barolt, I'm sure that isn't what you meant when you said you become the strongest in the world. Still come at me with everything you've got. If I did that, people on this YouTube channel would be complaining for a month. What aura transformation? Where? Behind you, cross impact, damn it. Oh no, what do I do? Everyone stay calm, you'll be safe here. Barolt once said that when a huge quake hits and the water suddenly pulls back, showing the ocean floor, a giant wave is coming and it'll wipe everything out. A giant wave bigger than Burry, yes, bigger than a house, way bigger, and if you can't escape it you die. So how did you beat the wave? I woke up. Don't move so much, your arm is only staying in place because of the glue. Damn, then what do I do? Stay still, there's nothing else to do. Those two aren't human anymore. One became like a god by pushing his own power to the limit, and the other stole the power of the goddess. Yeah, I know I can't jump into a fight like that, but I should at least clean up the mess Garhan made, unless I want trouble later. Divine power of darkness, you're a lot tougher now. Yeah, I think I'm finally getting how to control this power. Spear swords that shape, what a blast for me. Now I'll show you something truly divine, not that fake power. Divine manifestation veiled sword. So that's a divine sword. Doesn't matter, a sword is still just a sword. What matters is the person using it. Now it's my turn. Looks like the Sword King really can't be killed by swords. All swords belong to you, then all darkness belongs to me, and darkness is everywhere. Dark chains. But I've got a question, Barolt. How did you miss the reason I left out the goddess of darkness when I named the others? You really didn't know light and darkness are the first powers. Where there's light, darkness always follows. That's why out of all divine powers nothing surpasses darkness. It doesn't matter how much you argue, you're not a god of darkness, just a human pretending to be one, and the same is true for you, Barolt. There is a limit. One, only those who've reached the edge of the world can feel human strength, can't change it. That hopeless end. You of all people should know what despair is as the last survivor of the Volterian tribe, but still, why they didn't just reach the peak of human strength through training and effort. They also protected Ratna from transgressors and invaders of the world as a reward. The 6 goddesses named them heroes and told them when they would die so they could use the rest of their lives to keep growing and go beyond their limits. But Barolt barely cared about what the goddesses said about his death. He lived every day like it was his last. Even if they told him he had 20 years left, he still would have lived the exact same way. For Garhan, though, 20 years was nowhere near enough, and later at a party he introduces Garhan and Zenovia. While Barolt stays outside there, he runs into Garhan and jokes that he thought he'd be used to parties like this by now. Garhan says he only stepped out for some air, then stares at Barolt's clothes and asks if he has no sense of style. Barolt shrugs it off. Noble outfits just don't suit him. Garhan laughs, relieved to see he's still the same, then asks if any nobles made offers. Barolt says they want him to handle sea routes and the reward is big enough that no Valterra would need to work again. Still, he worries they may be planning something. Even so, a good bond between the nobles and the Sword King's tribe could help keep the peace, and if that's true, maybe their job is done. Garhan disagrees. Peace exists because of their crushing strength, he says, and without him the war might have dragged on for 5 more years. It wasn't just him either. Holian helped humans and fairies stand together, and without Zenovia's magic tools human soldiers never would have stood a chance against the Tarakios. Everything worked because they prepared for that war, and all of it happened while the goddess ignored them. Barolt asks if that's not exactly why the goddesses honored them. Garhan explodes, saying no, the only thing the goddesses gave them was a death sentence. Worse, they're focused on settling the terrestrials in Ratna. Once 3 of them die and only Holian is left, the Tarakios will start another war, and they won't be able to stop it. Not in 20 years, not ever, and without them peace will disappear. The goddesses abandon both them and this world. That leaves Barolt shaken. Then Holian arrives, calling for Barolt and saying his island is under attack. Only then does Barolt realize how badly Garhan had been suffering. Some people struggle just to carry their own lives. Garhan carried far more than that. He guided the heroes in the Hunters Guild, ruled his land, led his people, led the empire, made countless promises, and kept moving toward an ideal future. So many lives rested on him, but then he ran into the end of his own life and a goal no lifetime could ever reach. There was despair no human could overcome. At the same time, Barolt remembered sending his tribe back home, giving them enough food to survive so they wouldn't have to leave the island. After everything that happened, his powerful tribe still died for nothing. Sword King, strongest in the world, what was any of it for? I've already hit my limit. The gift we were given to save the world was despair. That's the truth of this world now, so all we can do is wait for disaster. All because the gods failed. Then why even knowing regret, even understanding that pain? Why are you still trying to stop me? Why, you of all people? You're asking me why? Because I do understand that pain, because I have regrets too. I regret that night. I regret not asking you to have a drink with me, my friend, so let's settle it this way. The winner gets what he wants. Ryu says there's no way to help him, but Leonhot says things are bad on his side too, worse than when he sealed the others before. He figures the gods must have weakened with the balance broken. Closing the rifts is much harder now. He already shot one of the angelic openings, but there are still many more. The protagonist asks how he closed them all at once, but Leonhot says it wasn't him. Then a cross appears in the sky, lighting up the whole world. Ryu immediately thinks it has to be Barolt. As the sky brightens, the result of the battle becomes clear. Was it a draw? Garhan says that's bad. Barolt agrees. In the end, they still won't know who the strongest is. Garhan laughs and asks if that's really what he's worried about right now. Then Garhan drops to one knee and says Barolt won because he fought using only his own power. Barolt rejects that idea. There's no such thing as a fair fight in this world and nobody cares how you got your power, so Garhan asks how Barolt avoided despair after his tribe was wiped out. Barolt says he carried the world's bitterness just like Garhan did. He too knelt before despair, but if Garhan wants to know the difference, there was still light inside the darkness. Even if the tribe is gone, their story will live on as long as someone inherits it. Nothing in this world lasts forever, and maybe that's why he was able to receive divine power through that truth. Even darkness is only a shadow made by light. Garhan asks if he really can believe that. Barolt says no, don't just believe it, think about the people who died because of you. If you give up now, every one of those sacrifices becomes meaningless. But then Zenovia drives something through his chest saying he doesn't get to disappear from this world. She adds that Garhan wasn't the only one who absorbed divine power and reminds him she'd already said it would be better to wait until Barolt died. Does he even know how much mana it takes her to move between dimensions, and now they'll need 3 times that amount. She says he pushed himself too far, so she's going to transfer some of the divine power to him. Garhan immediately gets angry, saying he knows he told her not to interfere with anything between him and Barolt. Zenovia tells him to think for once. First they need to get back and recover after all this. Once they become true gods, feelings like this won't matter anymore. Then something suddenly cracks, and when they look at Zenovia's legs, then Barolt strikes first and asks, leaving already what no reunion party. Zenovia is stunned and calls him a monstrous idiot, someone who should have died long ago. She fires off a spell at Barolt, sending out a beam of light. All that follows is the blast from the hit. Zenovia freezes in shock. A magic refraction blocked it. Barolt laughs, amazed he's lived long enough to see something like that. Then the whole group appears. Leonhardt warns them not to assume they can stop another one, but Alaji says there's no way they can just let Zenovia's attack go through. Kavir cuts in. This is their chance. Garhan and Zenovia are badly hurt, so she sends Ryu in. He charges up his aura as Zenovia mocks him, asking if an aura fighter really plans to challenge her mage at range. Then she orders them to disappear and forms a supreme magic circle, but Garhan notices something. He tells Zenovia to open a portal right away. What he realized was this: with Leonhardt's power, Ryu boosts his body, and with Atsu's power he boosts its limit. When those effects cross with the impact that strike smashes Zenovia's spell apart, Garhan still manages to pull Zenovia to safety, but she's left shaken. Her spell got broken that easily. Garhan tells her to stop wasting time and open the portal between dimensions. The problem is Ryu is already almost on them. Garhan quickly summons an elemental sword and says this is just like Tarakian jumping people when they're weakened. Ryu fires back that they were the ones fighting Barolt, so Garhan has no right to complain. Zenovia is furious, raging that they actually forced her to kneel. She starts casting at MC but gets shot before it lands. Her barrier saves her, and Atsi says surprised she could still cast one in that condition. Still, he interrupted her spell, so he fires again. This time Garhan blocks it and says pulling back now still counts as their win. Zenovia starts the spell again, but Kavir binds her with the goddess's power and asks if she's really running away like this. Zenovia tells her to relax. Next time she sees the envoy, she'll turn her to dust. Then she launches magic at Kavir. At the same time, during him and Ramya's fight with Garhan, he realizes he can't read his battle cry, so he decides close combat may be the better choice. He ends up using the protagonist's anger against him to defend against his attacks. Ryu soon notices Garhan avoided every killing blow, and after the last exchange Garhan slips away, but MC says it's not over yet. He's sure they said this would end here. Garhan suddenly gets a flash of Barolt. The moment he lost his arm, Garhan thinks this Tarakian is way too dangerous. When Ryu goes for a side strike, his broken sword starts to fall apart even more. Garhan thinks this is the perfect moment to kill him, but then he notices Barolt is being healed and still watching him, so Garhan kicks his way into the portal and says he'll remember Hanbin's name. He tells him to prove Barolt chose the right path, then disappears into the portal. After that there's nothing more they can do. Everyone is left shaken and sad by what just happened. Hanbin thinks Barolt risked his life to give him a chance and he still lost it. Now it's over. His sword breaks apart, then something flies toward him and lands right behind him. Hanbin turns and sees the sword, and Barolt says that if he'd really been Hanbin's enemy, Hanbin would have died 60 times by now. Then he asks why he's just standing there because this still isn't over. Syria tells Barolt to stay still. They're still trying to heal him, but Leonhardt's magic starts fading and Syria asks why he stopped. Leonhardt says it's too late. Barolt has already passed the point where healing can save him. He's only alive because he's using aura to stop the bleeding, and even that won't last. Barolt says they don't have much time. Syria insists his line, but Barolt says the real problem is Garhan and Zenovia. Using the guide of the Tarakios, the fire realizes that once Barolt dies, all that experience will go to Zenovia, and Holian says that's probably true. Barolt says they barely force those two to retreat, so they need to become stronger if they want to stop them for real. But the final blow that kills him doesn't have to come from the enemy. He tells Hanbin to pick up the sword. Syria asks what he means. Barolt explains that killing can let a warrior change when true warriors face each other, and he has no time left. Kavir says no, this method can't be used, but Barolt tells her she knows this is the only way to save Ratna. Kavir says she can't imagine how much guilt Ramya would carry for that. He's asking her to take the life of the Sword King himself, and if it has to happen she wants to be the one to do it. Barolt thanks Kavir but says Barolt understands even knowing that Terakos are driven by killing, he still wants her to bear this burden because a warrior's sword needs weight. Barolt laughs and thanks her. Syria tries to stop it but Leonhardt gently holds her back. Barolt tells Syria she loved his stories ever since she was little, the stories of his people. She's the last proof the Valterra tribe ever existed. Crying, Syria says she doesn't remember them all and begs him to tell one more. Then she asks, didn't he once say the Sword King was invincible? Barolt says he understands now people fear death. Then Syria answers that the Sword King is invincible because the Sword King never truly disappears. He lives on even in the dark, and now it looks like you're the strongest, Raymir. I'll leave the rest to you. Sword King Kavir apologizes, and through her tears the system announces, Ramnir, you have killed Barolt. The Sword King experience acquired. You have gained enough experience to level up, and that's where this season ends here on this YouTube channel. There aren't any more translated chapters yet.